Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
I don't want sympathy, I just want someone to tell me I'm not crazy. I've run through every explanation, exhaustion, hallucination, gas exposure, but nothing adds up. I know what I saw in that cave, I know what we heard, and more importantly, what we felt. You can say I'm mistaken, that's fine. Just don't tell me it wasn't real. It was my friend Zoe's idea. She's always had a reckless streak, urban exploring, off-trail hiking, night diving. I usually talk her down, but this time, I don't know. Something about the way she described the cave made me curious. It's not even on any of the maps, she'd said. A guy on the geology forum posted coordinates before his account went dead. Said the wind didn't blow the same down there. I should have said no. We left early, just 2 backpacks, headlamps, spare batteries, and a rope line. No cell signal where we were going. The cave entrance was narrow, more of a seam in the rock than a mouth. You had to slide in sideways between slabs of limestone to even reach the chamber. The inside was colder than it should have been, still air like nothing moved in or out. Zoe made a joke about ancient burial grounds. I didn't laugh. There was a dampness to the walls, like sweat, not moisture. The rock was wrong too. It looked like it had been scored with something, thin deep gouges, inconsistent in pattern. Not pickaxe marks, not natural erosion. It looked deliberate. We went deeper. The light from the surface was long gone, and all we had was the thin white cone of our headlamps. The passage narrowed, then opened into a wide chamber. I remember thinking the ceiling looked too high for how far we'd gone down, like we were standing in a space that shouldn't exist. Zoe moved ahead of me, scanning the walls. That's when we found it. A bundle of bones tied with what looked like human hair, hanging from the ceiling by a crude length of sinew. No carvings, no symbols, just a mass of bones gently swaying. I whispered, "Zoe, I don't think this is abandoned." She didn't respond right away. When she finally did, her voice was hollow. "This wasn't here in the photos." Photos? She hadn't mentioned any pictures before. I didn't ask. I was too focused on the smell that was suddenly thick in the air, like meat left in the sun but sweeter. That's when I heard it, something scraping stone. Not close, not far. Somewhere in that massive, impossible chamber with us. I turned, and for a second, I thought I saw something move. Long and thin, almost like a shadow peeled away from the wall and slipped out of sight. Zoe was already backing up. Her face had gone pale beneath the headlamp's glow. I grabbed her arm and whispered, "We need to go. Now." She didn't argue. We turned, retraced our steps, but the tunnel didn't look the same. The gouges in the walls were deeper now, fresher, some still wet. Zoe started muttering under her breath. I counted it. I counted the turns. I swear I did. I told her to keep moving, keep the rope line in hand, but when I reached for it, there was nothing. The rope was gone, just a frayed end, cut clean. Something had taken it, and it wasn't done with us yet. Zoe was unraveling. Her breaths were fast and shallow, fogging up the inside of her headlamp lens. I grabbed her by the shoulders, more to steady myself than her. "Hey," I said quietly but firmly. "We need to keep our heads. You counted the turns, right? So think, what's next?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "I don't know. I did count them, I swear. 3 right, 2 left, slope downward. But this isn't where we came in." I glanced around. The stone felt tighter somehow. Angrier. The air had thickened, like the cave was exhaling slowly and we were breathing in its rot. That smell was stronger now. Clotted, sickly sweet. I listened. There, beneath Zoe's frantic breathing, not hers, not mine, something deep, rhythmic, a slow drag in and out, not from any one direction, just around us, embedded in the walls or beneath them. I shushed her and held my hand out. She went quiet. We both heard it then, not a growl, not a snarl, just breath, like lungs the size of the room, expanding in time with our fear. I scanned the area. "There, look," I whispered. About 10 feet up, there was a narrow ledge, natural rock, slanted inward like a lip above the tunnel mouth. If we could get up there, maybe we'd get a better view of the layout, or at least feel like we weren't being watched from every direction. I helped Zoe climb first, boosting her from below. Her boots scraped and kicked loose gravel, and I winced with every sound. My turn was harder. My fingers trembled against the sharp stone, my legs aching from tension and cold, but I made it. The ledge was wide enough for us to crouch. Our lights reached further up here. That's when I saw it. A shape just outside the cone of our beams. It was too tall. That was my first thought. Not like like a person, like someone had been stretched upright, arms long, joints sharp, body so thin you could see where the ribs nearly pierced the skin. Its back was turned, pale, scabbed flesh stretched tight over its frame. Its head scraped the ceiling, and it was listening. One long arm curled out and touched the wall, claw tips dragging across it gently, like it was feeling vibrations through the stone. My breath caught and it froze. No sound, no movement. Then its head twisted, not turned, twisted, the neck bending like a broken branch until one sunken, pupilless socket faced our direction. It didn't blink. It didn't move. Zoe made a noise, something between a whimper and a choked breath, and I grabbed her mouth just in time. The thing tilted its head, its other hand flexed. Claws like carved antler tips scraped together, click, click, click. Then it sank back into the dark, not walking, melting. The way it moved made me feel wrong inside, like gravity didn't apply to it the same way. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt. We sat there for what felt like an hour, maybe it was minutes. Time felt fake down there. Zoe finally leaned in. Her voice was so quiet I barely heard her. I don't think we found the cave. I think it wanted us to find it. That thought didn't feel paranoid, it felt true. The walls were grooved, the air was still, the bones were arranged. This wasn't some forgotten tunnel, it was a trap, baited with something only the desperate or curious would follow. I pulled out the backup flashlight and checked our gear. Still had a flare, half a bottle of water, no rope, one knife. We couldn't stay up here. Whatever that thing was, it knew now. We had to move. I started to climb back down when I saw something strange in the rock below, thin lines in the stone that looked too symmetrical, almost like script, not in English, not anything I recognized. Dozens of little carvings etched into the ledge just below where we sat, each one a perfect copy of the last. Zoe saw them too. That looks like the markings near the... She stopped herself near the bone bundle. We both knew it. Below us, the breathing started again, but this time it wasn't steady, it was excited. I told Zoe to stay. Don't move, don't make noise, don't shine your light unless you hear me call for you. She didn't argue, just nodded with that hollow, hunted look. Her hands gripped the rock until her knuckles went white. I climbed down from the ledge and slipped into the corridor on the far side, one we hadn't seen before. It felt older than the rest. The walls here were darker, like the stone itself had been scorched. Not from fire, from time, or something older than time. My boots crunched something brittle beneath them. I didn't look down. The deeper I moved, the warmer it got. Not physically, that's not the right word. It was like the space-remembered heat. A stale, decaying warmth that stuck to your skin like grease. I turned a corner and found another chamber. This one was smaller, oval-shaped. The walls weren't stone anymore, at least not naturally. They were carved into reliefs, figures I didn't recognize, arranged in circles, each with their heads bent toward the center. In the middle of the room was a pit. I don't know how deep it went. My light couldn't reach the bottom, but I could hear it. Something moving down there, slow, wet, rhythmic. It didn't echo. I backed out before whatever was down there noticed me. When I returned to the ledge, Zoe was gone. No blood, no drag marks, no scuffle, just gone. Except, there was a new bone bundle, hanging from the rock just below where we had been sitting. Fresh, not skeletal, not cleaned. Something wet still clung to the twine holding it together. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I couldn't. My body locked up, my mind flooded with one thought that repeated over and over. It took her. My flashlight flickered, not out, just dimmed, the way a dying memory does in the back of your mind when something older pushes forward. I ran. I don't remember the path I took, only that the cave shifted around me. The same hallway split and doubled back. I saw my own footprints over and over again, and then I didn't. There were no footprints, no dust, just smooth stone as if nothing and no one had ever walked there before. When I finally collapsed, I was staring up at a patch of sky. Pale morning light filtered through a hole barely large enough to crawl through, roots hung like fingers. I pulled myself out with everything I had left. I don't remember how I got back to the car, or how I drove. I woke up in my apartment 2 days later, dehydrated and covered in scrapes. Zoe's things were still in the trunk. She's never been reported missing, no records, no digital footprint. It's like she was erased the moment we stepped into that place. Except, yesterday someone slid something under my door. A strip of pale leather tied around a bundle of hair. Zoe's. I recognized the braid. There were markings markings burned into the leather, same as the carvings in that cave. I've spent hours trying to match them to anything, runic scripts, tribal symbology, ancient languages. Nothing matches exactly, but one symbol keeps showing up. It looks like a figure bent backward over a ring of thorns. Sometimes it's drawn with antlers, sometimes it has no face, sometimes it looks like it's smiling. I'm not posting this for clout. I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm posting it because I found something else burned into the inside of the leather. Not in ancient script, in English. 5 words, you were meant to watch. I haven't slept since, and I'm not sure I should, because sometimes just before dawn I hear breathing in the walls. Dad was drunk again. Rain swept over my windshield like waves over a beach as I drove him home from yet another bar where he'd made a fool of himself. He wasn't the drunken brawler type, no, he was a crier. He'd sit at the bar with his head on the table and just start sobbing, wailing, bringing down the whole mood of the place. Even now he shifted between crying and sniffling while staring out the passenger window and half-conscious states where he couldn't muster the mental coherence to even register such complex emotions. At one point he even leaned over the center console and tried to hug me, almost making me jerk the steering wheel. Dad, no, Christ, I'm trying to drive here. I snapped at him. Keep on your half of the car or I'm pulling over. Like a loyal dog, he recognized the tone of my words, even if not their meaning, and shrunk back sheepishly. Since I was in elementary school, people told me I was remarkably mature for my age, but you kind of have to be when you're forced to act like the parent of the family. The road traveled parallel to our sole local river, the one the school kids all called the Devil's Gutter. It snaked in and out of sight behind the tree line, as if it liked to taunt every driver that passed. The thing was evil, I knew, but I couldn't help but feel a certain nostalgic fondness for it. It was the only thing offering any sense of danger and mystique to what would have otherwise been the least interesting small town in the country. From a glance it seemed mild, shallow, and narrow enough to make it across with a leap. There was no way of telling that it was actually hundreds of feet deep, that the undercurrent was stronger than an Olympic swimmer could withstand, that the banks were undercut and impossible to climb back up once you were in, that the carbonated water had intricately carved networks of hundreds of channels and caves deep into the limestone. Misjudge your leap and you'd be seized by the undercurrent, dashed against the rocks, plunged deep into some dark cave within which your body would be preserved forever, pinned to a wall or ceiling of stone like some macabre decoration. The gutter features in our every folk tale and ghost story. When I was a kid, we liked to tell the tale of old Bart O'Neill, a 19th century prospector whose cat was apparently very popular with the neighborhood toms. Every time she'd get knocked up, it was said, he'd gather up the kittens into a burlap sack and toss them all into the Devil's Gutter. At least, and this was when whoever was telling the story would lower their voice to a whisper, until they found his body in his bed, shredded by hundreds of small claws. His eyes had been clawed out, his fingers bitten off like carrots, his ribcage torn open, and within his chest the police found dozens of tiny poops. That's right, according to legend, the spectral kittens had used his chest cavity as a litter box. That was all made up, of course, the crude invention of imaginative schoolboys. But I have looked through old newspapers and found that someone named Bart O'Neill really did disappear from town a long while ago. No gory details, just up and vanished. The only oddity I noticed was that when his cat was found still locked up in a cage in his shed a week after his disappearance, it was well fed, as if somebody had been sneaking in and caring for it. See, this is why I hate taking this road. With every glimpse of that river, my mind always wanders, back to old memories, terrible memories, ones that would have been better left forgotten. It ignites a fire in me, a sort of morbid curiosity I've come to dread. But then Dad broke my line of thought with a long, obnoxiously loud groan, and then I was thinking of the first time I had him in my passenger seat when I was some anxiety-ridden kid, no older than 15, didn't even have my driver's license yet, my hands shaking late that New Year's night as I struggled to dodge all the other drunk morons swerving all over the road. New Year's was always the worst night for him. This would have been our anniversary, he was groaning. It would have been our 15th. I got over what happened to Mom over a decade ago. Why couldn't he? We aren't the only people who've experienced loss anyway. When I was growing up, the whole town mourned the death of Annabelle, captain of our high school cheerleading squad. She had tried to jump the gutter and even cleared it, but there'd just been rain and the muddy opposite bank gave way beneath her feet and she went right in. Crazy thing was, 15 minutes minutes later, they got a ping from some SOS beacon her mother had made her wear. They took this as proof she'd made it out alive but injured and triggered a frantic search of the surrounding area, with no luck. There were rumors, however improbable, that she'd found her way into an air pocket somewhere in that limestone cave system, just close enough to the surface that just one of her desperate calls for help managed to make it through. Sometimes I picture her down there in a kind of darkness I could not fathom, struggling to keep her head above the water. I wonder if she knew that surrounding her, somewhere in the dark, were the corpses of those who had been pulled into those caves before her. I picture a gaunt, bleached hand brushing her ankle as those currents carry one by. I imagine her crowded on all sides by the gaunt, empty eyes of the people who'd found their way into that air pocket before her and never found their way out. Maybe it was for the best that she would have been in complete darkness. There my mind went again. I'd gotten another glimpse of the river and couldn't help but imagine Anna down there, as if her eyes were looking up at me from beneath those blackened waters. I tried to turn up the radio to take my mind off it and to drown out Dad's moaning and sobbing, but he grunted as if the very sound offended him and drunkenly pawed at the dashboard until he turned it back off. I already knew what he'll say tomorrow. "I've let you down," he'd say, head down like a dog caught peeing on the carpet. "I've never been the father I should have been, and it'll all be very genuine and very sincere and very, very temporary. I've even helped pay for his rehab once. He'd been found choked half to death on his own vomit. This is a wake-up call," he'd said. "I'm finally ready to be the dad you've always needed me to be." A few grand seemed like a small price to pay to have my dad back. And indeed, for a few months of sobriety, he was the best dad on earth, the best I ever could have asked for. And then came New Year's again, and it was suddenly like none of it ever happened. My eyes glimpsed a cross set up along the gutter, a bouquet left at its base. I knew exactly who it was for. When I was in 4th grade, Bethany, a little girl who went to the same school as me, was swallowed up by the gutter. Her father was the only one who witnessed the accident, and there'd been some suspicious circumstances. I don't really remember, something about marital issues, custody, that sort of thing. Point was, everybody suspected him. But what proof did we have? The gutter never parts with its secrets. 3 years or so later, her dad just up and vanished too. Nobody thought much of it at first. Everyone assumed he got tired of the side eyes and just skipped town. But then, months after everyone had forgotten the whole business, someone started sending around a voicemail he'd apparently sent out at 3 in the morning, the night he disappeared. It had apparently been sent to some random coworker from his contacts list. An accident, clearly. The first minute or two just consisted of the sort of rustling you'd expect from a pocket dial, so they hadn't thought much of it. It hadn't been until their curiosity drove them to investigate deeper that they realized they could hear the dad's heavy, belabored breathing and the sounds of twigs and leaves crackling beneath his feet, as if he were wandering through the middle of the woods. Moreover, off in the distance, they could hear another voice. The faint voice of a little girl, bubbly and giggling like they were playing a game. "Daddy," the voice kept crying out into the night. "Daddy, where are you?" They noticed too that you couldn't hear any crickets or birds or anything else you'd expect out in the forest at night. Everything was dead silent, like all the creatures of the woods sensed the presence of a predator. The dad's breathing grew heavier and more panicked whenever the voice grew louder, nearer, but it remained stifled, as if he was desperately trying to keep quiet, remain unnoticed. Eventually she was so close that you could hear her little footsteps in the leaves, and the dad didn't even dare to breathe. And then, the sound of branches being parted, the father's gasp, and that little voice laughing and declaring in a sing-song tone. And at that exact moment, the voicemail reached its time limit. The cop's official line was that it was a fake, just some audio doctored up by bored teenagers to feed into the sensationalized mythology of the Devil's Gutter. But Bethany's remaining relatives swore up and down that they recognized that giggly little voice, that it was unmistakable. Lost in thought, I blinked, and somehow in that instant, a woman appeared in the middle of the road. I can't remember the next few seconds. It was as if I'd time traveled. One moment I was driving along, and the next I was stuck in a muddy ditch on the roadside. The hood just inches away from an oak tree sturdy enough to have bisected my car, and Dad was screaming like a madman, incoherently at first, but then congealing into a name. Jessica. He was screaming out for Mom, I realized. Jessica. And as he screamed, he threw open the passenger side door and tore off into the woods with a drunken stumble. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the woman was still standing there in the road, a vague silhouette barely illuminated by whatever whatever moonlight broke through the storm. But when I looked back with my own eyes, she was gone. I cursed like a sailor as I took off into the storm, blindly in the direction I thought my dad had went. My heart was in my throat. We were so close to the gutter. In his state, he could so easily fall in, become just another name in its long list, another creepy story to tell on school playgrounds. But then it became clear I was in the same danger. The storm was picking up rapidly, sideways rain blasted my eyes, wind tugging at the trees by their roots. Yet somehow, stupidly, what terrified me most was the prospect that, while stumbling through those darkened woods, I might hear a little girl's voice off in the distance shouting, "Daddy." Suddenly, I froze in place. I realized I could hear the bubbling and crashing of the gutter's current, even over the storm. It must be so close. I tried to look for it, but the rain seared my eyes whenever I was not covering them with an arm. I was too terrified to take a step in any direction, but the storm took action for me, by sweeping away the mud beneath my feet. Anna's fate flashed in my mind, the muddy bank giving way. My death wasn't even going to be original. I thrashed and floundered, feeling the earth seem to envelop me from below, like a massive creature pulling me into its gullet. Through sheer luck, my random grabs caught purchase. A thick, sturdy tree root was all that saved me from the waters below, and I clung to it with every scrap of strength I had, even as the rain left it soaked and slippery. I managed to hold on for a while, with no way back up but unwilling to let go of my only lifeline. And then I felt a cold hand wrap around my ankle. My body tensed with such horror that I lost my grip in an instant, and those cruel waters had me. They seemed to toy with me for a while, spinning me about under the surface as I curled up into the fetal position. The shock of the frigid cold caused me to suck down a breath instinctively, filling my lungs with water. As I scratched at my chest, my eyes opened for just a split second. On either side of me were those thick limestone walls, pockmarked with the black abysses that were caves, and that limestone led down below, far below, disappearing into that infinite, inky blackness beneath me. The experts' guesses must have been wrong. The gutter couldn't just be a few hundred feet deep, it had to be a mile at the very least. Just looking down into that darkness, I felt the same sense of vertigo as I'd felt looking down from the roof of the Empire State Building. That, and an overwhelming sense of things looking up at me, staring back. It reminded me of joining the theater group as a kid, standing on a stage for the first time and realizing that there were over 100 pairs of eyes on me, watching me, expecting a performance. Except this time, I knew they were here to watch me die, watch me become one of them, sink down far below the surface and join them in all that darkness, never to see sunlight again, except vaguely through the surface of the water, miles above my new home. But even that didn't terrify me quite as much as the prospect of landing in one of those caves, even as the undercurrent bashed me savagely against rocks, and my lungs cried for air. My only focus was avoiding them. I swear I could see bloated arms and grasping hands reaching out from the dark of each cave, grasping for me as I passed by, as if each occupant was lonely, desperate for a companion in their eternal resting places. Suddenly, the current bashed my head against a rock, and from then everything was abstract and fuzzy. I could only muster a single coherent thought. Please, not here, it went. Don't let me die here. Somehow I knew that if I died beneath these waters, my soul would never break the surface. As if to answer my prayer, a pair of arms settled around me. Not the cold, grasping claws reaching from the caves, but something warm and comfortable, embracing me, cradling me close in a way that told me everything would be okay. Again, the next few seconds were a blur. I have no explanation for how I ended up back on the shore, shivering from the freezing waters and hacking, retching, emptying the water from my lungs upon the mud. All I know is when I looked up, a bolt of lightning briefly illuminated the stone memorial looming above me, upon which read, "In love and memory of Jessica Whitaker." I know everything about the mythology of the Devil's Gutter because I was part of it. My family is one of the ones the school kids whisper about, the ones they make up wild stories and creepy theories about. Terminal cancer, they'd say around campfires, that was so horribly painful that not even the morphine could do anything for her. She'd been a painter, you know, always drawing portraits of the gutter. She was the only person who thought it was beautiful, not evil. So the legend goes she begged her husband, "Please take me to the river. Let me become part of it. I don't want to hurt anymore." They say that they did it on their anniversary, New Year's Day. I heard a long choking rasp. For a moment I was almost relieved. I thought it was another of my father's drunken groans. Then I realized it was coming from the river itself. I turned and beheld a dozen hands reaching out over the side of the banks, unnameable things pulling themselves up from the waters. I only caught vague glimpses of the crawling, groaning creatures, briefly illuminated by the lightning. Their skins were bleached white and transparent, looking like road maps made of veins and arteries stretched taut over gray muscles and jagged ribs and putrid organs. Many were missing legs, arms, even heads. Others were more ancient still, mummified strands of flesh seemingly loosely stitched to the crumbling remains of a skeletal structure. All seemed to be looking right at me, even though none of them had any eyes to speak of, only empty black sockets. They were crawling forwards with horrid determination. Once the gutter had taken you into its waters, laid its claim to you, it never wanted to let you go. They were only coming to retrieve what they were owed. I tried to crawl away through the mud, but it felt like crawling in a bad dream. It felt like the very planet was turning sideways, gravity itself guiding me back towards the river. Then a figure burst through the woods, large and heavy set, my father. He stumbled into the middle of the crowd of the dead, waving his arms, trying to seize their attention. Take me, not them, take me. He was screaming like a man possessed, but they didn't seem to even notice him. They were dead set on me, blind to the rest of the world. Then he turned to the lake and my eyes followed his gaze to the woman from the road. Now her silhouette was standing in the middle of the river, seeming to hover a few inches above the water, her dress billowing in the wind. Jessica, take me, tell them to take me. He let out a primal, raw scream, one that must have torn his throat to shreds. I don't want to hurt anymore. She calmly beckoned him with a finger, and in that moment he knew what he had to do. He didn't even hesitate. He went sliding down the bank, and for a moment he seemed to stand upon those bubbling, surging waters just like she did. His arms were stretched wide as he stumbled forward, as if ready to embrace her. And then I blinked and they were gone. So too disappeared that legion of the dead. It seemed like they'd accepted the trade, one soul for another. The gutter always took its due. It would have been easy to tell everyone that my dad had just stumbled stupidly into the gutters during another of his drunken stupors, but I wanted people to remember his sacrifice. I weaved some tale of me falling in, and him jumping in after me and hoisting me out, even at the cost of his own life. It didn't make a lot of sense, I must admit, and some people even suspected me for a while, but eventually everybody just accepted the idea of him being a hero in his last moments, getting some redemption in the last. People like when stories get wrapped up in neat little bows. Sometimes I still dream about the two of them, floating in the center of some underwater cave chamber, yet somehow illuminated by moonlight, and by the walls of the chamber all lined with glowing pinprick white eyes like stars in the sky. Dead but not dead, the current still flowing about them, animating them like marionettes, spinning them around each other, my mother in my father's arms like a waltz, the way they were on their wedding day, dancing, dancing on and on forever before their audience of the dead. I wasn't allowed to talk to the boy with wings, my brother, but I wasn't permitted to call him that anymore. My mother said he was supposed to be an angel, except I knew what angels looked like, the idealized versions from movies as well as the biblically accurate ones. He was more like a crow, a hideous bird-like creature resembling the body of a male adolescent college student spliced with a diseased bird. My brother didn't even have a name. To my parents, he was like a stray cat who picked them. They didn't love him or want him in the house. On the flip side, he was also an angel, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to observe something that defied the laws of physics, with power like no other. He, like my sister, was a lost child of the sky, those ethereal beings who had fallen thousands of years ago and decided to walk on Earth. He had saved my life as a baby. I was so young that I don't remember it, but Mom likes to remind me every year on my birthday that I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the angels in our attic, my adopted brother and sister. I was born severely premature with only a small chance of surviving one night. Mom said she prayed endlessly, begging for a miracle, and it was visited by the two beings who gave me life through their divine power. When I pulled through, Mom begged them to stay and watch over me until I was old enough to fend for myself. If I think back to my earliest memory, it's the angels babysitting and watching over me. Back then, they actually looked cherubic, or maybe that's just how I remember them. My brother bore huge white wings, almost like a swan, while my sisters were more grayish. They used to smile and giggle, and for a while we were actual siblings. But as I grew up, I saw less of them. Mom would drag them away while we were in the middle of some shenanigans, and I wouldn't see them for days, sometimes weeks. I thought the angels had finally flown away back home. I was sad, I guess. siblings. I mean, I was just a little kid and my older siblings had vanished. When I started hearing noises upstairs, the familiar sound of their wings scraping against wooden floorboards and the crumbling ceiling, Mom and Dad told me my siblings were now inside the attic. It was too dangerous for them, so they were safe upstairs, which meant no more playing with them and especially no more mentioning them to family members and friends. Mom was very strict with me. They're magical beings, Nini, she told me one night before bed. There's a lot of bad people out there who will want your brother and sister for bad things, so we need to keep quiet about them, alright? I went to school the next day and drew a picture of the two of them playing with me. At the end of class, my teacher gently pulled me aside. Am I in trouble? I asked, and she laughed, gesturing for me to sit down. No, you're not in trouble. I just want to talk about the art you made during class. I shuffled on my chair, well aware of my promise to Mom. I wasn't allowed to talk about the angels in the attic. This is a very pretty drawing, Nini. My teacher said, holding it up. Are they angels? I nodded excitedly. They're my brother and sister. Her eyes darkened. She shuffled back on her chair. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... No, my siblings are alive, I said. They're angels and they live in the attic. I remember her smile was a little too big. She leaned forward, plucking my drawing from my hands. Do they have names? No, I told her matter-of-factly. They're not allowed names. Her smile faltered slightly. What do you mean they're not allowed names, sweetie? Mrs. J was my favorite teacher usually, but I could already sense her growing unease. I pretended not to see her digging her nails into my drawing. I told her exactly what Mom told me. Because they're angels, I said, giggling. They don't need human names. Mrs. J nodded, handing me back my drawing. Sweetie, I know I'm not supposed to ask this. I'll probably get in trouble, so can we keep this between you and me? I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. Maybe I had said the wrong thing. Okay. When my teacher leaned closer, her expression darkened significantly. Let me back up a couple months. Mrs. J had been absent for a while. She used to be smiley and colorful, always excited to teach us. But she came back weeks later, distant and somehow hollow. Her smiles were forced, and even then, sitting in front of me wearing a giant grin, I could tell my teacher was distraught. I felt guilty that my siblings were angels and could probably heal her pain. Mom's rules would never allow that. Nini, would you be able to tell me what these angels look like? I shrugged. Well, they have wings. No, Nini. Mrs. J stabbed at the drawing, running her index across my sister's stick-person face. I had drawn her thick red hair in a fuzzy, crayoned blur, and my brother's curls in a brown cloud. I never saw their halos, but I'd drawn them above their heads anyway, along with large feather-like wings. What do these angels look like? I was going to reply, but then Mom poked her head inside. Nini, it's time to go home, honey. She smiled at my teacher, who, to my surprise, stuffed the drawing in her pocket. Mom definitely saw her attempt to hide my picture. I saw her demeanor stiffen slightly, her arms already defensively crossing over her chest. Mrs. J, is there a problem? My teacher jumped to her feet, faking her smile once again. I was just talking to Nini about her homework. Mom nodded slowly, maintaining her expression. I'm sorry about your children. She cleared her throat. They were so young. They're my babies, my teacher's voice splintered. I'm sure you understand a mother's grief. Please excuse me. I'm here if you want to talk, Mom said. We all know Adam liked to dabble with recreational drugs. Mrs. J's smile faltered, and I saw the switch from my teacher to a parent. I don't need your pity, she spat. If I'm honest with you, if I hear one more person telling me everything is going to be okay, I am going to lose my mind. Thank you, but I don't want your sorry. I don't want your condolences. Her voice broke, and I immediately wanted to give her a hug. I watched my teacher open up my laptop, ostensibly ignoring my mother. If you're going to stand there and waste my time, I suggest you leave. Mrs. J caught my eye, her lips curling into a scowl. Mrs. J pulled out my drawing, slapping it on the desk. Your daughter has an interesting imagination. Mom's eyes widened as she took the drawing. She wrapped her hand around my wrist and gently pulled me from the room. When we were in the car on the way home, I asked why my teacher was so upset. Mom didn't reply for a long time, leaving me drowning in uncomfortable silence. I knew she had the drawing. I knew I was in trouble. I expected her to lecture me, but instead she bought me chocolate ice cream from a drive-thru. While I was eating it, she cleared her throat. Mrs. J lost her children, Mom said, her fingers tightening around the wheel. She wants, no, craves a miracle, and you gave her hope with your drawing. Mom pulled it from her pocket and, to my horror, tore it up and threw it out of the window. I watched it land in a puddle. My brother's crayon smile disappeared disappeared under the murky water. Nini, did you tell Mrs. J about your brother and sister? I didn't answer, ice cream creeping back up my throat. Nini, Mom said again. I shook my head. No, I lied, and when she gave me the look, I caved. I just said there are angels living in the attic. Mom nodded slowly. Did you say they were real angels? No. Did she ask what they looked like? I wasn't a fan of the interrogation, my eyes swimming with tears. I don't know, I mumbled. No, she just liked my drawing. Mom curled her lip. You're absolutely sure, Nina, because if you're lying, bad people will come and take your siblings. She only called me Nina when I was in trouble. Yes. Mom leaned back into her seat, breathing out a sigh of relief. That's good, she whispered. I flinched when she turned to me, grasping my hands and squeezing them tight. Because we can't have anyone taking them away, okay? They're your angels, sweetheart. Following that day, I wasn't allowed to even mention the angels in our attic. If I did, either intentionally or accidentally slipping up, I was promptly sent to my room. The problem was, no matter how many times I was told not to talk about them or completely ignore their existence, I refused. These two, whether angels or not, were still my brother and sister. I told my aunt about them when I was maybe 10 during Thanksgiving dinner. It was a slip of the tongue. She thought I was joking. We were all sharing our wishes for the upcoming year, so I had held up my glass of juice, copying my parents' toast, and declared, I wish I could see my brother and sister who are in the attic again. Aunt Jules spluttered on her own wine, and I caught the look she shot my mother. She already had tomato cheeks, giggling a little too much for an adult woman. Mom had already set several glasses of water in front of her, but she was ignoring all of them. Frida, she chuckled, wiggling her eyebrows. Is there anything you should tell me? Mom slowly lowered her own glass, her lips pressed to the rim. Jules, you know my daughter has an overactive imagination. They're more like imaginary friends. Aunt Jules straightened in her seat suddenly, her smile fading. That's not what I wanted to talk about. She turned to me, color bleeding from her cheeks. Nini, why don't you go upstairs to your room? I need to talk to your mother. No, it's okay. I'm almost an adult too. I smiled at my aunt. Nina, you are 8 years old. Dad grumbled, inhaling piles of mashed potato. I didn't move, staying stubbornly still. I figured if I stayed as still as possible, the adults might not notice it was past my bedtime. Nina, Mom's tone was a warning. Go upstairs. I reluctantly dragged myself upstairs. When I tried to listen in on the conversation, hiding on the stairs, Dad picked me up and carried me all the way up to my room and tucked me into bed. I thought I could stay awake and strain my ears to listen to the conversation, but I fell asleep. I was woken by something wet trickling down my face. Opening my eyes, I found myself staring at a single puddle of red pooling from my ceiling. I sat up, swiping my fingers down my face. Blood. When a lone feather hit my cheek, I jumped out of bed, my heart hammering. Instead of calling for my parents, I grabbed my pink chair from my dressing table and positioned it below the red stain. I hopped onto it, standing on my tiptoes and dragging my fingers across scarlet. I risked knocking 3 times. To my surprise, there was a response. 2 single knocks. Are you okay? I asked, pressing my face to the ceiling so they could hear my voice. Another single knock, number something ice cold slithered down my spine. I tried again. Are you hurt? Yes, his voice was a soft sob. I jumped, almost toppling off of the chair, hearing my brother's strained voice. When I really listened, pushing all of the sound out of my head, the light hum of my bedroom light, and my parents downstairs arguing with my aunt, his cries splintered through the silence. I jumped off the chair and almost immediately heard the sound of his movements, his wings scraping the floor. Nini. I imagined him pressing his face against the floor. What are you doing? I got all the way to the door, my fingers wrapped around the ornate handle. I'm telling Mom you're hurt, I said. You need help. Wait, don't. The urgency in his tone stopped me dead in my tracks. It's just a broken wing, he whispered. I'm okay, it will heal. I didn't know what to do, so I stayed with him, balanced on my chair, for hours. I told him stories from my favorite books, and he seemed to like them. He even knew the characters' names before I said them. When I was getting sleepy, I dragged a blanket from my bed and slumped into the chair. What's your name? I don't know, he said after an uncomfortable pause. Mom said angels don't have names, I said. No, correct. Okay, so can I name you? I heard the sound of him rolling onto his side. Sure. Simba, I declared, glancing at my stuffed lion perched on my pillows. He chuckled, and I realized I had never heard an angel laugh before. It sounded just like mine. That's not a proper name. Peter. I was frowning at my scrappy copy of Narnia. Nah, he sighed. I don't think that's me. I picked up a random book, flicking through it. Okay then, how about Jude? Jude, the angel murmured, wallowing the name around his mouth. I like it. I nodded excitedly. What about our sister? Lily. The small squeak came from the angel girl herself. I like the name Lily, she whispered. I felt proud of finally naming them, and they started to feel more like siblings to me. I started sneaking food up to the attic, just salted crackers at first, and holy water from my mother's fountain. But angels are hungry and had a particular liking for snacks and junk food. Initially, I shoved the food through the cracks in the floorboards to avoid getting caught, but then I grew brave and started hauling my old Nintendo DS and an ancient game of Monopoly up there. I had to squeeze myself through a suffocating gap after climbing up a wobbly wooden ladder and carefully removing several floodboards so I could pull myself through. Once I was through though, eagerly holding snacks and games, my eyes adjusted to surroundings, my DS slipping through my fingers. I had never been inside the attic before. When I questioned what was inside, I was told it was for storage, except the storage room smelled of antiseptic. Could you put the floorboards back? Jude's shuddery voice startled me. I'm cold. The two figures slumped against the wall sent my heart into my throat. Jude and Lily. I hadn't seen them since I was a child, since they were dragged away from me when I was playing. I had grown up with their voices bleeding through my ceiling and imagined them much older, but they were still the same age. Exactly the same age. College kids, or maybe older, early 20s. The same angels who played with me when I was a child. The two of them were pale, gaunt in the face, almost skeletal. I always thought their wings were beautiful and swan-like, majestic, otherworldly, but this wasn't what I remembered. I could feel my breaths growing heavy, a shiver creeping down my spine. I wasn't even sure I was looking at an angel at all. Their wings were tattered and shredded, barely attached to their backs, heavy and very clearly weighing them down. When I was a kid, I distinctly remember my brother's wings as perfect. There was no explanation why they were there or how. The explanation was that they were angels, and human laws didn't apply to them. However, what I was seeing did have an explanation. Jude's wings weren't beautiful, unexplained phenomenons magically sprouting from his back. In the haunting white light buzzing above me, I could see exactly where his naked spine protruded from his skin, splitting in two, where horrific feathered appendages resembling wings blossomed, spliced through a filthy t-shirt. I risked a step toward them, noticing the two of them stiffening up, like I was going to hurt them. Mom lied, that was all I could think. She said they had blankets, food, and books. She said they were happy staying locked away in our attic. The more I had time to think, to wrap my head around what I was seeing, it hit me that this room above our house wasn't a safe place to protect our angels. The light was painful to the eyes, fluorescent and cruel. The walls and ceiling were clinical white, but it was the angels themselves that didn't make sense. Against the backdrop of what felt and looked almost like an operating theater, my siblings looked out of place, bound in cruel chains biting their ankles and wrists, binding them to the walls themselves, to the very foundations keeping the house together. I took another step forward. Something was sticking from my sister's arm, a long plastic tube feeding into her. Closer. I glimpsed rivulets of red beating down Jude's back. Another longer tube, this time filled with clear liquid, sticking directly from the incision carved where his spine split in two. I pretended not to see the metal clamp forced inside bloody slithers of flesh, his wings shuddering, individual feathers trying to contract, trying to spread wide and folded into grotesque flaps. Lily sat awkwardly, her back to the wall, strawberry blonde hair hanging in flickering eyes. I glimpsed one single plastic tube stuck into her arm. She seemed to be in better condition, her wings easily unfurling when she shuffled back, her lips parting. Mom and Dad weren't protecting the angels from the outside, they were experimenting on them. It's okay, Jude murmured, lightly nudging the girl. It's just Nini. Lily's weary eyes found mine, half-lidded eyes struggling to stay awake. Slowly, I knelt in front of them, my eyes stinging. I pushed filthy brown hair from my brother's sleepy eyes. Before I could speak though, he weakly gestured to the DS I dropped on the floor. His voice was a slurred mumble and my gaze shot to the tube cruelly sticking from his spine. Does that have Mario? His question took me off guard. I shuffled back, grabbed the DS, swiping dust from the screen. I slid the power on and his eyes lit up. No, I held it up so he could see the screen. But I do have Nintendogs. Jude grinned, though I wasn't expecting to see sharp incisors jutting from his gums. Sounds fun. He held out his chained wrists. Do you want to play? I had so many questions, but at that moment, looking at the creases in my brother's expression while he was in pain, I swallowed my words. I played with them until the sky turned dark. When I was packing up, I couldn't resist moving towards, my heart jumping in my chest. I tried to pull the tube from his spine, and his wings jerked, his eyes widening. Don't. He snarled like an animal, and I stood paralyzed. Jude shuffled away, his wings twitching, struggling under the clamp. His breaths came out in sharp pants, his fingernails almost like claws dragging across the wooden boards. "Don't touch me," he spat. "Do you understand?" I didn't move and his expression softened, his teeth retracting. "I'm sorry," he said. "It just hurts." I finished for him, choking on my own sob. "My mom and dad are hurting you." Jude didn't reply for a moment before his head jerked up. "Do you remember that one time when you wanted to fly? You jumped off of the bunk bed and broke your arm and we ran for your mom. We love you and we care about you, but we need help now too." I nodded. "Do you have a paper and pen?" I did. I brought a whole coloring pad up for drawing. I nodded, handing him a blank piece of paper and a crayon. Jude scribbled a number and handed it to me. "Can you call this number?" he whispered. I nodded. "Why? Is it like part of your job as an angel?" His expression furrowed, but he replaced confusion with a smile. "Yeah, it's a job." He leaned back, wincing when his wings brushed against the ceiling, visibly in pain. "I've been here for so long protecting you, I need to check up on all the other children." "Jude," Lily grumbled, nudging him when he rolled his eyes. "Knock it off." "Why?" His smile was bitter. "Aren't we just doing our jobs?" That night, I left the attic with a mission, feeling optimistic. I was going to call the special angel number and help my brother do his job. Mom was making dinner, so it was easy to distract her. I made a huge deal about dessert, and when she was grumbling to herself, pulling ingredients for cookies from the cupboard, I swiped my mother's phone from her purse, locked myself in the bathroom, and dialed the number. I was so excited, my fingers were all clammy. The dial tone sounded in my ear, before the sound of someone picking it up. "Hello?" Before I could speak, Mom was unlocking the door, pulling her phone from my grasp. "Nini, what are you doing?" she demanded, apologizing to the recipient. "Yes, hello, I'm so sorry my daughter accidentally called you." She shot me the dagger eyes before walking away, her phone to her ear. "No, I have no idea how she got your number. Have a great night." Mom didn't get mad. Instead, she made me cookies. I was nibbling on a chocolate one when she leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Nini, I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to tell the truth." "I was doing a job," I said, dipping my cookies in fondant. Her eyebrows furrowed. "You were doing a job?" I nodded. "One of the angels gave me an angel number so I could do his job for him." Mom's lip curled. "Okay then, can I have the angel number?" When I hesitated, she sighed. "Nini, I'm sure he would rather an adult was doing his job for him." She held out her hand. "Sweetie, I don't want to ask you again." I handed it over, words suddenly choking from my mouth. "Why are you hurting them?" Mom looked taken aback, her eyes widening. "Nini, why on earth would you think we are hurting them?" "I saw them," I said, my voice breaking. "You're doing bad things to their wings." Mom hugged me and I found myself splintering apart, burying my head in her chest. "Nina, sweetie, you are very, very wrong," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. "They're sick," Mom murmured into my shoulder, running her fingers through my hair. "When they brought you back to life as a child, they were so weak, so they couldn't fly away. We didn't tell you because we didn't want to scare you." I nodded, squeezing my mother to my chest. It all made sense. They were fixing their wings. "Your father and I have been trying to save them," she hummed. "Of course, with them being so powerful, we have no choice but to take extra measures, which, yes, include chaining them up." She pulled away from the hug, wiping away my tears. "Nina, you need to understand that they are extraordinarily powerful, and only chains soaked in holy water will hold them. When they were younger, they were weaker and less destructive, but as you saw, they are growing stronger every day." I felt a pain in my chest. "Then they'll fly away," I whispered. Mom pursed her lips but nodded, giving me another cookie. "Then they'll fly away." I didn't visit the angels for a while after that. I think part of me was scared of them, scared of their destructive power, but then I missed them. So I grabbed snacks from the kitchen, a handful of DS games I knew Jude would like, and crept out of my room, making a beeline towards the attic. Except when I climbed the wobbly stairs, the loose floorboards leading to the attic had all been replaced. I had an idea to tell them by knocking on my ceiling, but when I came home from school, running up to my room, my bedroom was out of bounds. "We're redecorating," Mom smiled brightly. "For now, you'll be sleeping in our room." I had no way to contact them. When my room was finished, I had a brand new ceiling. I knocked all night, balancing on my chair, waiting for a response. I never got one. I did hear them though. In the middle of the night, their pain screams bled through my walls, keeping me awake. I saw their blood seeping through the walls, the ceiling, stray feathers choking the air, as if our house felt their agony. When I slipped out of bed, I stepped on tattered pieces of their wings, pricking my bare feet. I ran the faucet to wash my face, but instead, blood ran thick, staining porcelain. They must have been sick enough to almost feel human. I heard their wails, their pleads for death, and half wondered if they were asking their father, God. Mom told me over breakfast that the angels were deathly ill. She told me to pray for them, and I did, bent over my frosted flakes. I prayed their father would hear them and save them, like they saved me. Eventually their cries stopped. Dad said they were finally stable, and my mother broke down in tears. When I hit my tweens, then my teens, I forgot about them. I was still aware of the sick angels in my attic, but being a teenager, I guess I was more interested in experimenting with my sexuality and spending time with friends. But that didn't mean they didn't exist. When I was 18, I left for college, but I still visited for the holidays. I finally saw them again. It was hard to ignore the boy with tattered white wings jutting out from his spine and the slit in his shirt as he dragged himself downstairs, sneaking into our refrigerator. I wasn't sure what this version of Jude was. He was different from the one I met in the attic. That boy still resembled a human, still felt pain. This guy had talon-like fingernails and a twisted spine protruding from his back, making him appear more bird-like, but his wings were bigger, his spine hidden by a blood-drenched shirt clinging to him. He was always hunched over, moving slowly, his once human features obscured by thick dark hair covering his eyes. I tried to ignore the grime stuck between his toes and the scarlet trail from the refrigerator to the door. He didn't even acknowledge me, sticking his face directly into a frosted cake my mother made. I watched, mesmerized and maybe a little disgusted, as he chewed through the cake, whipped his head up, swallowing it down, exactly the way I'd see a crow eating bread. When his eyes did find me, they were beady and wrong, almost vacant. He ignored me, standing on his tiptoes to sniff around in the cupboard. Jude. I found myself saying his name and it felt and sounded foreign. He didn't respond, ripping open a bag of candy bars. He was ravaging a Snickers bar when I turned to him, swallowing down bile. Jude's sickness really had turned him from an angel into something else. His body was more of a grotesque contortion of angel and human. His bones jutted out in weird places, his wings a lot better and sturdier, but much sharper, every individual as sharp as a needlepoint. How old are you? I asked casually. I'm almost 19, and you've been 19 for most of my life, but you're also an angel, so that would make you like old. It was a joke. I was hoping he'd retained his humor from when I was a kid. I remembered telling him a joke, and he actually laughed, like a real proper laugh. Jude, I said again. He twisted around, chocolate slew dropping down his chin. It hit me when he slowly inclined his head, beady eyes twitching. He couldn't understand me, or at least he was struggling to fully understand me. I noticed his eyes were glued to my lips. He was reading my words. I stood up slowly. Mom and Dad were at the store, so I didn't have much time. If you have wings, why don't you fly away? Jude dragged his twitching body to the door, his arms full of snacks. I didn't expecting him to laugh, one arm whipping out, curled nails gripping the doorway, the other grasping salted chips. His laugh was strange, no longer human, more of a bird-like squawk. Instead of speaking, he saluted me with his candy bar and walked away, still chirping to himself. 2 weeks later, I got a glimpse of Lily. Her wings were larger than her, monstrous gray appendages splitting her spine in two. Lily's clothes were barely clinging to her skeletal frame. She was hunched over, a single chain wrapped around her ankle. She went straight to the kitchen faucet and turned on the stream of water, gulping greedily, her fang-like teeth piercing silver. When she dropped to her knees, weighed down by her wings, I couldn't stand it anymore. I shoved the door open to the patio. Go, I managed to choke out, pointing outside. Fly, I won't tell Mom. I saw her longing to be free, desperation crumpling her attempt at a smile. She nodded, making a beeline for the door. Her wings weren't strong enough, so I grabbed duct tape and reinforced them as much as I could. I pulled off my jacket and threw it over her shoulders, pulling her into a hug. She didn't speak. I don't think she could. Her neck was narrower, more bird-like. I wasn't even sure if she had vocal cords anymore. Go, I said, halfway to the door. I'll go get your brother. With a broken smile, she stepped over the threshold. She was so close to cold air on her skin, sunlight reflecting in wide, hopeful eyes filled with tears. I watched her spread her wings, flying up. There was a knock on the front door, and I panicked, shutting the door. Go, I hissed, and hello? Footsteps. They weren't my mother. Frida. The kitchen door flew open, an all too familiar face, followed by a pained shriek. Serena. It took me half a second to realize my old elementary school teacher was standing in the doorway, her frenzied eyes glued to Lily. I watched her take slow steps forward, stumbling, her hands covering her mouth. Serena, she sobbed, "Oh God, my baby." Her lips started to curl and I felt her scream rooted inside my skull. Her gaze locked onto the girl's wings. "What did they do to you? What did they do?" Bang. In the time it took for the angel to drop to the ground and her mother following suit, reality slammed into me in an icy wave. Lily hit the patio, scarlet spreading around her. She wasn't an angel. Nina. Mom was in the doorway, a shotgun in her hands. Next to her, Jude stood, his eyes wild, his mouth gagged by my mother's hand. "Mom," Jude muffled. His gaze found my teacher crumpled on the floor, his expression contorting, growing feral. He lunged forward, his bird-like cry becoming more human, resembling a child's scream. Mom yanked him back, slamming her hand over his mouth. "Mom." I watched, paralyzed, as she turned on him, sticking the gun between his brows. "Stay," she spat, running the barrel of the gun down his naked back. Mom saw his sharp glance towards freedom, forcing him into his knees. "Move and I shoot her." She twisted back to Lily, who wasn't moving. He dropped to his knees, slowly raising his hands. "Okay," my mother gasped out, "so I want to get several things very clear." In 2 strides, she was looming over my elementary school teacher. I watched her stick the barrel of the gun, protruding it into the woman's head and blowing her brains out all over our kitchen floor, seeping scarlet and fleshy pink chunks decorating my shoes. The angels didn't react. Lily lying in her own blood and Jude staring dead-eyed at his mother. I couldn't breathe. I was aware I had thrown up all over myself, but I didn't remember moving, only the thick acidic sludge dripping down my face. "You don't have a mother," Mom spat at Jude. "You are a fallen angel who dropped from the skies thousands of years ago and now walks the earth." I watched her cradle the boy's face. "You saved my daughter. You were my perfect miracle." Mom's eyes were manic, her smile widening. She tightened her grip, forcing him to look at her. "Aren't you?" He didn't reply, his lip curling. Mom laughed in his face. "Adam, you were your mother's worst enemy," she said, spite dripping from every word. "Do you know how much it upset her to see her own son hurting himself right in front of her?" Her gaze flashed to Lily. "Serena was a whore of a woman," she spat. "Every day I watched and listened to your mother complain about the two of you. You stole cash for drugs, sold her car, and even used her medication to satisfy your disgusting, filthy habit. Serena was sleeping around and your own father called you a disgrace. Honestly, Adam, I should have left you in that hotel room." She gripped harder, her manicured nails slicing into his skin. "Unconscious drooling, a needle sticking from your veins. How pathetic." He cried out sharp, more akin to a crow, trying to jerk from her unyielding grasp. "I should have let you destroy your body, let your mother find you unresponsive again." Mom stepped back, admiring him. "I gave you wings to save you," she whispered. Dad came through the door, already hauling bleach in a body bag. Mom must have known my teacher was planning to visit. I think this was the point where I was supposed to do something, but I was frozen, standing in pooling blood and splintered pieces of my teacher's skull. Dad hauled the angels back to the attic and I was left with my mother. "Grab me a bucket," she said, like disposing of a body was normal. I didn't speak to my mother. Instead, I grabbed my backpack and left the house. I went straight to the sheriff's office and told him directly that I had witnessed a murder and that 2 missing college students were in my parents' attic. I don't think they believed me at first. I shouldn't have led with, "I think my mother turned 2 missing college kids into angels." Officially, Adam and Serena would be 39 years old. I wasn't looking forward to trying to explain how the 2 of them resembled teenagers. Still, I sat in the back of the police cruiser, following a dozen cops to my house, which was empty. Mom and Dad were gone, and when the cops broke through into the attic, it was just storage space. The angels were nowhere to be seen. It didn't take the cops long to start pointing the finger at me. I was hauled back to the station, and after I was interrogated and then lectured on wasting police time, I was released. With no choice but to go home, I began my search. Jude and Lily had to be somewhere, hidden away. I couldn't imagine my parents running away with 2 genetically engineered angels. I started in the attic, where all I could find were old boxes, ancient toys, and a D's. Mom and Dad were good at covering their tracks. Moving to my parents' room, there was nothing of importance until I crawled under their bed. There was nothing under there, but there was a lump in the carpet, another loose floorboard. This one led me into a shallow hole filled with documents. Spreading them across the floor, I found Adam and Serena's names. Mom and Dad were documenting their progress. Day 1. Subjects are calm. Neuromuscular blockers administered. I am going to attempt to make an incision into the spine of the S1. I will update with progress. So far, everything looks good. There was 19 years worth of research and procedures, but they didn't stop after Adam and Serena. I found old files from years ago, back when they were babies. Names that kept going: Nathan, Lily, Charlotte, Matthew, Jesse, Victor, Evangeline. Something sickly crept its way up my throat. If my parents had been experimenting on all of those people, where were they now? I got my answer when I dug deeper into the old subjects. Failed was stamped, a sea of red. Reaching further into the shallow cavern, my fingers brushed something warm, something wet and soft, almost like feathers. I retracted back, and as if it was alive, as if it could feel, the ground rumbled beneath me, and I heard that soft cry once more. That wail. I couldn't stop myself. I jumped up, tearing at the walls of my parents' room, and stepping back. When paint became slick and wet, bloody feathers stuck to my palms. When a single eye blinked back at me, I stumbled back, my heart in my mouth. Mom was right, she was wrong. She lied about almost everything. Jude and Lily were not angels. They did not save me when I was a baby. Jude and Lily are my parents' successful attempt to replace what is living inside our walls. The angel my house was built on, its bones made from its foundations, its blood splattered across our walls. I think it's upset. I think it wants its children, all of its children, from past and present, back. It's already started to cry, the walls are bleeding, its ceiling is crumbling, floors caving in. The angel whispers in my ear, a language that twists and contorts my thoughts. This thing is threatening me. If I don't bring back its children, it's going to kill me. But I can't help wondering if it's trying to tell me something. Are those that failed still inside our house? I'm updating this post before I post the whole thing. Last night I couldn't sleep. I have been in agonizing pain for hours. Lightning bolts are running up and down my spine. I stuck my hand under my shirt to relieve the tension, only to pluck a single feather quill from my body. What my parents did to Jude, Lily, and all those kids. Am I their next subject? I woke on my back, spine pressed into a surface that mimicked grass, pliant yet unyielding like memory foam carved into blades. Above me stretched a sky that defied language. Clouds hung frozen, their edges unnaturally crisp, as if cut from bleached felt and glued to an abyss. The void behind them was not mere darkness but erasure, a vacuum that gnawed at the edges of perception, like staring into the static between radio stations. Only the clouds tethered me to reality, their faint bioluminescent glow suggesting some alien photosynthesis, pulsing in slow, arrhythmic waves. The field stretched infinitely in all directions, a fractal nightmare of uniformity. Each blade of grass was identical, chartreuse at the base, fading to citrine at the tip, precisely 3 millimeters wide. No soil nestled between them. They sprouted from a seamless mat of dull silver, like astroturf woven by machines. When I pressed my palm down, the stems didn't bend. They resisted like plastic bristles, yet emitted a faint organic musk, sweet and cloying like rotting lilies. The air hung thick, devoid of humidity or temperature, as though the atmosphere itself had been vacuum sealed. Time dissolved. Seconds bled into hours. My hand drifted to my chest. No rise, no fall. I clawed at my throat, fingertips sinking into gelatinous flesh that reknit instantly. Panic flared briefly in my mind, but dissipated just as quickly. My body remained inert, a marionette with severed strings. When I raised my arm, the non-light of this place seeped through my skin, revealing a lattice of veins like cracked porcelain. My flesh was vellum soaked in glycerin. The grass beneath was visible as smudged impressions. A magic eye painting gone wrong. I waved a hand. No shadow followed. No proof I existed at all. A scream tore through my skull, silent and airless. A vacuum-sealed eruption that left no echo in the sterile void. My jaw unhinged grotesquely, tendons straining against their limits, yet no vibration troubled the stagnant air. Fear metastasized in my gut, a tumor with teeth, but my face stayed slack, a wax museum replica of terror. Movement flickered at the edge of my dead aquarium vision. 3 figures sat on the grass in the distance, their nudity neither provocative nor obscene, as if gender and modesty had been scrubbed from them entirely. Their skin mirrored mine, semi-opaque with a faint opalescent sheen, like soap bubbles moments before bursting. The oldest, or perhaps merely the most eroded, rose first, his feet levitating a micron above the grass. Each step left no imprint or whisper of friction. He seemed to traverse a hologram rather than solid ground. Up close, his face resembled a Botticelli angel, flawless symmetry marred only by eyes without lids or lashes and lips that moved a half second out of sync with his words. Don't worry. The voice emanated from everywhere. The grass beneath me, the air around me, the inside of my molars. It resonated like a bow dragged across cello strings, vibrating deep in my marrow. Everyone feels this way at first. He gestured toward the others. The woman hugged her knees tightly to her chest. Her hair was frozen mid-sway, a cascade of liquid mercury caught in time. The teenage girl plucked at grass blades with fingers that passed through them like mist. Her face was a mask of automated boredom. Their bodies flickered faintly as if buffering, edges pixelating like corrupted JPEGs struggling to render fully. Come, the old man intoned softly but firmly. Sit with us, we'll answer what we can. Terror should have petrified me, but without cortisol or catecholamines coursing through me here in this place where biology had no dominion, fear became nothing more than an abstract concept, theoretical and distant. I floated forward instead, legs moving with marionette autonomy, and sank cross-legged beside him when commanded to do so. The grass beneath us remained preternaturally stiff, jabbing needle-tip precision into my thighs, yet leaving no marks behind. You must have many questions. His voice rumbled through the ground beneath us, a sub-bass growl that vibrated up through my bones until it reached my teeth. Their eyes pinned me, pupils dilated into black holes surrounded by faintly bioluminescent irises that pulsed faintly like dying embers in milk glass sockets. Where am I? My voice startled even me when it emerged hollowly, reverberating oddly, as though spoken through an ancient tin can telephone stretched taut between dimensions. You're an anemone, he replied evenly while his lips stretched into something resembling a smile but not quite human enough for comfort. It didn't crease his marble smooth face naturally either way. The name slithered off his tongue like syrup-thick vowels from some archaic dead language resurrected momentarily just long enough for its meaning alone to haunt its listener afterward indefinitely. I blinked. So I'm not in heaven? Not yet. His gesture swept toward the horizon, where the grass fused seamlessly with the anti-sky. Anemone is a purgatory of patience, a sieve. The others tilted their heads in unison, their necks creaking faintly like unoiled hinges. We are the residue, the unworthy sediment, waiting to get into heaven. Yes. His finger traced the air, painting invisible sigils that dissolved as quickly as they formed. 63 years for me, 58 for her. The woman's nod was robotic, her hair frozen mid-sway like a suspended waterfall. 19 for the child. The girl mimed plucking grass, her fingers phasing through blades as static as plastic ferns. Time here is not time. Why aren't we in heaven? He leaned closer, his pupils glowing faintly, twin embers in milk glass eyes. The soul must molt, shed its husk, regret, greed, the rot of living, until it's weightless, pure dot. His gaze dropped to my chest. But yours already burns. He tapped my sternum with a sound like a dull thud, wet clay struck by a fist. Look. I glanced down. A glow pulsed beneath my wax paper skin. Not the sickly, guttering flicker of the others, but a relentless white radiance, as if I'd swallowed a neutron star. The old man recoiled slightly, his own chest dimming like a bulb on a dying circuit. You won't linger here, he whispered, his voice tinged with venomous envy. I squinted eastward, where the void blurred into a silver smudge on the horizon. How do I leave? The angel descends for the ready. The others stiffened at his words, their translucent faces contorting, mouths twitching, eyes narrowing, as if struck by invisible blows. You'll see the gate, the rest of us. His voice frayed and unraveled into silence. The girl resumed her pantomime, fingers raking through grass that refused to yield. The woman hugged her knees tightly to her chest, her chin resting on spectral joints. None spoke, none needed to. I followed the old man's gaze eastward again, straining to see what he saw, or perhaps what he only hoped to see. But the void stared back at me with indifference. A shudder passed through the group like an electric current rippling through their forms. The woman's hum sharpened into a whine. The girl's fingers froze mid-pluck. I pressed forward with the question clawing up my throat. If heaven's real, is hell? The old man laughed, a dry rasp like beetles scuttling over dead leaves. Hell is a fairy tale, a scarecrow. He spread his arms wide, encompassing the frozen field around us. The waiting, the nothing. Souls linger here until the angel comes to get them. I don't think there's a hell, it's only this for us. The others blurred at their edges, their forms pixelating like corrupted film frames struggling to hold shape. The girl hissed softly, her voice voice frayed and brittle. He's been here longest. He thinks he knows, he doesn't. The old man ignored her entirely. His gaze latched onto the horizon again, ravenous and unblinking. You'll learn the truths in heaven, he said softly but firmly. Ask God about hell, about us, about why your first breath mattered. A pause stretched taut between us before he added, then come back and tell us if you can. Silence smothered the group like an oppressive fog. The woman resumed rocking in place, her hum now tuneless and arrhythmic, a sound that gnawed at my nerves without rhythm or melody. Above us, the void deepened further still, the clouds glowing whiter now. Or was it my chest light bleeding into this faux sky? I opened my mouth. Enough. The old man raised a single finger sharply to silence me before I could speak further. Save your breath, he said flatly but not unkindly. You'll need it there. Time thickened around us like syrup poured over glass. We sat together in silence, an excruciating stillness akin to holding one's breath indefinitely, as though someone had pressed pause on existence itself. The old man's quartz-like eyes drilled into the eastern void with unwavering focus, while my questions curdled inside me, unspoken yet unbearably heavy, their weight crushing against my ghostly ribs. Then, a tremor fissured the air, not a sound but a frequency, a subsonic drone that vibrated the marrow of my translucent bones. The grass remained petrified, unyielding, but we shuddered, our forms rippling like oil on water. Above the eastern horizon, the void tore open with a soundless scream, its edges bleeding molten gold. From the rift poured light so pure it seared my ghostly eyes, etching after images of prismatic static onto my vision. And then the thing emerged. It unfolded like an ancient star exhaling its first breath, a colossal orb armored in segmented plates of bone white and gilt, each joint humming with celestial harmonics that resonated in my chest like the tolling of cathedral bells. Wings wider than cityscapes arched from its flanks, but these were no feathered limbs. They writhed with thousands of eyes, human pupils dilated in terror, goat-slitted irises glowing sulfur yellow, compound insect lenses fracturing light into rainbows. Each eye blinked in discordant rhythm, their depths swirling with dying galaxies, newborn nebulae, and the cold fire of quasars being born. The group jerked upright as one, their limbs snapping taut as if yanked by invisible strings. The old man wheeled toward me, his lips contorting soundlessly, his face a mask of raw hunger and venom. The angel's wings beat once, a thunderclap that compressed the air into a diamond-hard wall, but not a single blade of grass quivered beneath us. It hovered there, suspended in its incomprehensible majesty, every eye swiveling to pin me in a kaleidoscope of gazes. The voice impaled my skull. Do not be afraid. It was not sound but sensation, the taste of copper and burnt honey on my tongue, the smell of glaciers calving into Arctic seas, the pressure of a supernova shockwave flattening my form into nothingness. My knees buckled under its weight, yet my terror dissolved into a narcotic haze, thick as opium smoke, coating my mind in velvet oblivion. Come to me. I moved without volition, a marionette tugged skyward by invisible strings. The angel's carapace peeled open with mechanical precision, its segmented plates retracting like the petals of some obscene metal flower. Within lay a core of liquid light that churned and writhed like molten plasma. It cascaded over me in a torrent, dissolving my translucent flesh in layers. First skin, cold and sharp, like alcohol evaporating, then muscle, a sigh of release, then bone, the snap of a shackle breaking. I should have screamed, but instead I unraveled. You will do perfectly. The light was neither warm nor cold, it was revelation. It flayed me to my essence, stripping away doubt, memory, fear, everything, until only a single radiant thread remained, pure and untainted by thought or form. My disintegration was not agony but surrender, the relief of a marathoner collapsing at the finish line, lungs heaving, soul singing. I ascended. The eyes on the wings tracked my rise with unblinking precision, galaxies spinning in their depths like cosmic clocks ticking down to some unknowable end. Below me, the figures dwindled. The old man's mouth twisted into a silent curse. The girl's half-raised hand trembled as though fighting an invisible leash that bound her to this place. Then the rift sealed itself with a wet, organic snick, and Anamoni winked out of existence. The light swelled, a supernova in reverse, its brilliance contracting inward until it dimmed to a dying ember. Darkness. Not the hungry void I had seen before, but something softer. A velvety oblivion dense with possibility. Somewhere in its depths a faint hum resonated, the echo of a heartbeat, or perhaps the birth cry of a star. Consciousness seeped back like ink spreading through oil. I blinked, and the sterile void of anemone had been replaced by a gilded nightmare. The field around me teemed with grass that moved, blades rippling in a breeze that carried no scent, no warmth. Beyond stretched a city that defied physics, spires of molten gold twisted into fractal patterns, bridges of translucent crystal arcing between towers like frozen lightning. The structures pulsed faintly as though breathing, their surfaces crawling with hieroglyphs that squirmed when stared at directly. Far beyond it all loomed a throne the size of a mountain range, its edges blurred by distance and the sheer impossibility of its scale. Upon it sat a figure of pure radiance, its form shifting between humanoid and geometric abstraction, a head like a dying star swiveling slowly to survey its domain. The light from it pressed against my vision, not blinding but oppressive, like standing too close to an open furnace. I spun, searching for the old man, the girl, but I was alone, until I wasn't. They appeared without sound, two men carved from wax by a deranged sculptor. The taller one's hair gleamed like polished brass, his companion's was obsidian black. Their features were mirror symmetrical to the millimeter, too perfect to be human. No pores marred their alabaster skin. Their eyelids didn't flutter when they blinked. They moved in staggered unison, the shorter one always half a step behind. Their robes shimmered with false humility, threads of light weaving through linen that hissed faintly, like radio static caught between stations. The shorter one tilted his head, eyes swallowing the light, pupils flat and depthless as event horizons. When he smiled, his teeth were slightly too large, slightly too sharp, slightly too white. "Hello, James." The taller one's voice was a wind chime made of bone. "Welcome to Heaven's workshop." He spread his arms wide, sleeves billowing to reveal wrists jointed like doll limbs. "Ask your questions. We do love fresh perspectives." "What's going on?" My voice echoed oddly in the space around us, as if the air itself resisted sound. The shorter one buzzed, a locust rattle trapped in a human throat. "Tell me, James." He tapped my chest with his fingertip, freezing cold against my translucent flesh. "Does it itch, the light inside, like a trapped moth battering your ribs?" I staggered back instinctively. "What is it? Why does it feel alive?" "Because it hungers." The taller one began circling me like a predator stalking prey. "Most souls are clouded with prayer, diluted by millennia of groveling to imaginary gods. But you..." His breath smelled of burnt wiring and ozone. "You starved yours. Let it grow feral, untamed, a perfect battery." "Battery? For what?" My voice cracked under the weight of his words. The shorter one giggled, a sound like breaking glass underfoot. "The gears of paradise, James, the engines that spin the stars." He gestured toward the distant throne with mock reverence. "Even he needs fuel, especially now with so few pure souls left to burn." But I didn't believe. Why me? My words tumbled out in desperation. "Belief is a contaminant." The taller one's smile stretched unnaturally wide, lips splitting at the corners without bleeding. "You're a virgin wellspring. No saints, no sins, no tainted dogma. Just raw screaming potential." I backed away further this time, my heels sinking into grass that gripped like tar. "You can't just take it. Can't we?" The taller one purred as if savoring my resistance. "But we're so generous, we'll even trade a gift for a gift." His pupils dilated until they swallowed his irises whole. "What does your mortal heart crave, James? Wealth, power, wings to flutter about like some songbird?" The question curdled in the air between us. "Do I have a choice?" My voice was barely above a whisper now. The shorter one leaned in close enough for me to feel his breath, a dry rasp against my skin. "Choice is a fairy tale," he hissed through teeth too sharp for his mouth. His tongue flickered briefly, forked and serpentine before retreating behind his grin. "But we'll pretend you do. Play along, it's more fun." My mind scrabbled for leverage as panic clawed at me from within. The throne's light pulsed in my peripheral vision, a migraine wrapped in majesty, and I blurted out the first thing I could think of. I want to fly, to be an angel." They froze. Then the shorter one howled, laughter shredding through the air in dissonant harmonics that made my ears ache. "Fly? You think feathers and harps?" "Oh, James." He clutched his sides as if he might split open from amusement. His ribs creaked audibly under the strain. "You'll fly all right, straight into the furnace." The taller one raised a hand sharply, silencing him with an almost imperceptible gesture. His expression softened into something resembling pity, or perhaps mockery disguised as mercy. "If flight is your desire..." His fingers snapped once. The air tore open. A portal bloomed before us, a gyre of cobalt and magnesium white light whose edges gnawed at reality itself like acid eating through fabric. The shorter one seized my arm with talons disguised as fingers. His grip burned cold against my spectral flesh. "Come, fledgling," he hissed gleefully. "Let's clip your wings." I resisted instinctively, but the light inside my chest betrayed me. It tugged toward them as if magnetized by their presence or their willpower alone. My body lurched forward without consent. They stepped through first, their forms unraveling into shadow puppet silhouettes as they disappeared into the portal's swirling depths. It hummed ominously, a dentist's drill amplified through infinite black holes, and then it was my turn. I followed. The air turned gelid, thick with the sterile stench of formaldehyde and ozone. The room's whiteness wasn't just light, it was absence, leaching color from my vision until the world blurred into a nauseating void. Then I saw them, 1,000 eyes bulging from every surface like tumors. Their lids peeled back wetly, irises kaleidoscoping between reptilian slits and human pupils, each gaze drilling into me with predatory focus. The floor undulated faintly, a living carpet of eyeballs rolling beneath my feet, their viscous tears pooling around my ankles. The golden slab dominated the room, sculpted into a gargantuan hand frozen mid-reach, fingers curled into talons. Its surface writhed with glyphs that squirmed like tapeworms, their edges glowing faintly bioluminescent as if fed by rot. The air around it warped, humming with a subsonic frequency that vibrated my teeth. "Lie down." The shorter one's voice wasn't a sound, it was a command etched directly into my skull. I stumbled backward, but the eyes on the floor shifted, their collective gaze herding me toward the slab. My chest light flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows that slithered up the walls like sentient stains. "Lie down." His words splintered into echoes, each syllable sharper than the last. Light ropes lashed out, serpentine tendrils of liquid nitrogen hissing and steaming as they coiled around my limbs. Their touch burned with a cold so absolute it felt like fire, searing through my spectral flesh into the core of whatever passed for my soul. I screamed, but the sound fractured into static, swallowed by the room's insatiable whiteness. The slab throbbed beneath me, its vibrations syncing with my unraveling pulse. The glyphs squirmed faster now, forming patterns that made my mind recoil, a language of tumors, of broken bones, of starved things chewing through the walls of reality. The taller one raised a prismatic shard, its edges fracturing light into colors that hurt. Ultraviolet, infrared, hues no human eye should perceive. Painless, he lied as he drove the shard into my shoulder blade. My memories hemorrhaged. First to go, my mother's voice singing lullabies, dissolving into radio static. Then my first kiss, lips turning to ash, the taste of strawberry gum replaced by bile, the sting of a skinned knee, the thrill of a childhood bicycle ride, the warmth of a dog's fur, all siphoned into the slab's ravenous glow. Voices, mine, theirs, others, gibbered in a guttural tongue, Sclepius vore aphanizestai. The wing was a living blasphemy, feathers of rusted iron, membranes veined with pulsating maggots, talons dripping viscous black fluid. The taller one rammed it into my shoulder blade. It writhed, burrowing into me with a sound like teeth grinding on bone. My back arched as the wing fused to my spine, tendrils of rot spreading through my veins like ink and water. A flicker beyond the void. Beep, beep, beep. A hospital ceiling, a defibrillator's crack. Clear. My corpse jolted on the gurney. A nurse's glove gripped my face. "James, stay with me." Back in the white hell, the shorter one sawed into my other shoulder blade, his serrated blade screeching against spectral bone. "Hurry," he spat as the taller one slammed the second wing into me. This one chitinous and iridescent, its edges sharp enough to split atoms. My chest light dimmed further now, its radiance siphoned into the slab like blood draining from an open wound. Another flicker, beep, 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 a needle's bite, cold fluid flooding my veins. V-fib converting, don't stop compressions. The shorter one flipped me onto my stomach, pinning me as the wings twitched to life, their grotesque sinews knotting themselves into muscle and bone. He plunged a scalpel deep into my sternum. Light, my light, gushed out in torrents, pooling on the slab before evaporating into hungry glyphs. "Take it," he howled, claws raking at my chest. The taller one's hands melted through my ribs like liquid mercury, grasping for the core of my soul light. "It's rooted, he's fighting us." The shorter one's face unraveled, jaw unhinging, teeth splintering into glass shards, tongue elongating into a proboscis that stabbed toward my eye. "You'll crawl back," he hissed through his disintegrating grin. "We'll carve you out of that meat sack. We'll beep, 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 beep. Steady now, relentless. Pulse stabilizing, James, squeeze my hand. The white room shattered. Eyes burst like overripe fruit. Wings crumbled to carcinogenic dust. The men's screams faded, not into silence but into something more human. The wail of a heart monitor. Darkness. Then, wait, heat. A throat raw from screaming. Fingers gripping mine tightly now. A tether pulling me back from oblivion. Welcome back, James. A face swam into focus. A man in blue scrubs, his features softened by the halo of fluorescent lights above. His stethoscope gleamed cold against his chest, and his breath smelled of spearmint gum and exhaustion. Behind him, monitors chirped rhythmically, their screens casting jagged green shadows over the walls. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, cotton dry as I tried to speak. You're a miracle. The doctor's voice cracked with a mix of awe and sleep deprivation. His pupil dilated slightly as he said it, as though even he didn't believe his own words. A nurse hovered behind him, adjusting an IV bag with hands still trembling from the adrenaline of revival. Reality seeped back in layers. The beep of the heart monitor synced with my pulse. Alive, alive, alive. The starch-stiff sheets chafed my arms. The scent of antiseptic burned my nostrils. I clawed at the neck of my gown, gasping, expecting wings to burst from my back or golden ropes to snake around my wrists, but there was only the drip of the IV, the flicker of a muted TV in the corner, and the distant wail of a code blue over the hospital PA. Weeks dissolved into a haze of needle sticks and midnight panic attacks. ICU nights blurred into rehab mornings. My legs trembled like a fawn's as I relearned stairs that now seemed to warp like anemone's horizon. The cardiologist's words played on loop during treadmill sessions. Ventricular fibrillation, chaotic electrical impulses. He traced my EKG with a manicured nail, oblivious to how its glyph-like squiggles made me vomit into biohazard bins. No blood flow for 10 minutes. Miraculous you're here. I nodded absently, fingering the new scar on my sternum. A raised star-shaped keloid no surgeon could explain. I never spoke of the eyes. The throne. The thing that called itself an angel. They'd lock you up, whispered shadows pooling beneath fluorescent lights during sleepless nights. They'll say it's hypoxia, hissed MRI machines as they scanned me for damage they couldn't see. So I let them chart my PTSD and ICU delirium, swallowing pills that made everything gauzy and dull. To anyone reading this, heaven is not what they told us. It's not gates or gold or glory, it's machinery. Anemone is its waiting room. If you see the throne, if you see wings, if men with oil slick eyes whisper your name, run, fight. Let your soul burn out before they can siphon it dry. Better to fade into purgatory static than fuel their gilded eternity. I know how it sounds. I know what you'll say, but lean close. I'll show you the scars where they tried to carve me open. How they glow in the dark at 10 p.m. I remember the first time I saw it. I had been walking my dog down my street, minding my own business, when something caught my eye on the other side of my next door neighbor, Mr. Carlson's lawn. After standing there for a moment, unable to put my finger on it, I eventually noticed a key, just hanging there in the doorknob of his front door. Not thinking too much of it, I went on with my walk and immediately forgot about it, but then the next day I saw it again, as did I the next day after that, and the next day after that. Eventually, after a week had passed, I started to get worried. See, the thing is, I would have maybe written off the key as a simple mistake before going on a trip, but Mr. Carlson was quite old and frail, and had stopped leaving his house a long time ago, depending on caretakers for groceries and basic home goods. Which brought me to my next conclusion, that it must have been one of his caretakers. But then I remembered that they stopped by his house every few days, and surely would have noticed the key. Finally, after 2 weeks of indecision, I worked up the courage to walk over to Mr. Carlson's door, place my hand on the doorknob, the key still hanging from it, and turn the knob. As I turned it, I couldn't help but hear a faint echo, like the sound of a couple people shouting from 100 yards away. I stopped and looked around. Nothing. I turned back to the door, and opened it. Fearing the worst, I braced myself, closing my eyes. Upon opening them, I simply saw an empty foyer and let out a sigh of relief. But what I didn't know was that the worst thing that I feared was nowhere near what I'd soon discover. "Mr. Carlson," I called out before shutting the door behind me. Click. Suddenly the lights went out and I saw them. Mr. Carlson and Brenda, our neighborhood post office worker, sitting on the staircase together, a look of horror in their eyes. Mr. Carlson, what a relief. And Brenda, I haven't seen her in a week. I thought to myself, remembering the past week's strange lack of mail that everyone in the neighborhood had been talking about. Looking back on it, I should have put two and two together. But what possibly could the disappearance of our mail person and a key in my neighbor's door have in common? I was about to find out. Brenda, what are you doing in Mr. Carlson's house? She simply replied, the key. Oh, it's yours, I asked, letting out a sigh of relief after spending 2 weeks running through every possible reason for it being left in the door. But before I could bask in the moment, she interrupted me. Number, it's not mine, or his, she said before turning to Mr. Carlson, who looked exhausted. It belongs to him, the old man said. Him, I asked, confused by where he was going with it. The man who visits us, Brenda said. Visits you? What do you mean? Just wait. He'll be back, especially now that you're here. Mr. Carlson said. He's right. I entered just like you did after dropping off the mail and wondering if something was the matter. Finding Mr. Carlson here and that I was trapped inside. And within a few minutes the man arrived. Brenda explained. Wait, what are you trying to tell me? That you're trapped here, the old man said. Trapped? I laughed. Yeah, okay. Is this some sort of Halloween prank? What with the lights off and everything? That's when I casually walked back over to the door and tried to open it. Click, but it didn't budge. I stood there for a moment with my back to Brenda and Mr. Carlson, wondering if maybe there was some truth to what they were saying, and that's when I heard him. See, a hoarse, disturbing voice called out from behind me. They're right, you're trapped. Chills ran down my spine as I realized that the voice couldn't be coming from Brenda or Mr. Carlson. I couldn't bear to turn around, so I simply called back to the voice. Who are you? I'm the keeper of the keys to your worst nightmares. I turned around to find a man standing there in the darkness, his eyes glowing and keychains dangling from every inch of his body. Let us out, I screamed at him, pretending to be courageous, but terrified by the mere sight of such a thing. He simply replied, certainly, before looking at his body and removing a particular keychain with one key on it. Yes, this one's for you, he said as he handed it to me. This will open the front door from the inside. Go ahead, leave. I looked at the key, then back at the door, then back at the monster and smiled. You idiot, why would you ever give it to me? I'll be back with the police and you better not be here. Then I walked over to the front door and inserted the key. Don't do it, Brenda cried out. He's tricking you, Mr. Carlson added, but I was too compelled by my plan to listen to them and proceeded to turn the doorknob. Click, it opened. See, I said as I turned back to Brenda and Mr. Carlson with a smug look on my face. They simply shook their heads in disappointment. I turned back, opened the door, stepped outside, and shut it behind me. To find myself in a bedroom, my childhood bedroom to be exact. What the? I thought to myself as once again chills ran down my spine. Feeling unsettled by being in there, I opened the door and entered the second-story hallway, where I heard the sound of someone being strangled in a nearby bedroom. Normally, I would have been shocked to hear such sound, but this was one that I had heard before. This was a memory that I was reliving in real life now as an adult. A tear rolled down my cheek as I knew exactly what was happening in the other room, and despite my attempts to hold back, I couldn't stop myself from rushing into the bedroom and trying to stop him. But just as it had unfolded in real life many years ago, by the time I opened the door, it was too late. My father was dead, strangled to death by my brothers for reasons I'd only later find out. Andrew, no, I cried out, but he had already crawled back into the corner of the room, simply staring at my father's lifeless body. That's when he looked up at me and charged at me like a ravenous zombie, managing to claw away at one of my arms before slam. I shut the door and ran downstairs, expecting to find my mother down there, just as I had found her when the event had originally happened. But all that I found was Brenda and Mr. Carlson staring up at me with wide eyes. I'm sorry, Brenda said, seeing the expression on my face. How did you know? Because it happened to us, over and over, no matter which key he handed us. No, it can't be, I cried out as I began to shut down, unable to believe what they had told me, but I should have. As I stood there shaking in horror, I heard the sound of keys rattling, and I turned around to find the monster standing there again. What do you want? I cried out, but he didn't answer. He simply looked down at his body and removed a particular keychain with one key on it. Yes, this one's for you, he said as he handed it to me. I looked at the key, then back at the door, then back at the monster, this time unable to smile. I knew another horror lay before for me, knew that the key would not help me escape the house, but for reasons I can't quite explain, maybe I thought there was an inkling of a chance that the key would work, or maybe it was a desire to see my father again. I took it anyway, took it and opened the door, only to relive the same horrifying memory and return back to the staircase where Brenda and Mr. Carlson were standing. Once again the monster returned, once again he handed me a key, and once again I disappeared through the door. This went on and on until I couldn't bear to take it anymore and eventually gave up on the keys being of any help. When I finally declined the man's key, he simply replied, "Have it your way," before disappearing into the darkness. I turned to Brenda and Mr. Carlson, who went on to explain how they too had tried the keys and experienced nightmare after nightmare from their respective past. Then we all retired to the living room where we slept on the couch, chair, and floor respectively, reasoning that we should stay in the same room. The next day we huddled together, eventually coming to the conclusion that the house, its door, and the keys must be some sort of twisted test, caused by the key in the home's front door and enforced by the monster that wore an armor of key rings. We tried everything, from scouring the home for exits, to attempting to make calls on its dead phones, to prying at its boarded windows from the inside out. But after a week had gone by without a single lead, we eventually gave up. That's when someone else arrived. "No," we all screamed, our voices surely echoing outside just as I heard them, as Officer Howe turned the key to the front door and let himself in. By the time the door had closed behind him, it was too late, and 3 had become 4. Once again the monster returned, this time offering Officer Howe a key, who took it and let himself out, experiencing a nightmare of his own, only to return from upstairs a short time later with a look of horror in his eyes. After we told him our stories, he too declined the monster's next key, and we once again huddled together, eventually deciding that the answer must not lie in the house itself, but with the monster. But how do I stop it, I wondered. The next time he arrived, we tried to forcibly attack him as a group, but he simply waved his hand and froze us all in place, until he disappeared back into the darkness. That's when I got an idea, and took off after him into the darkness, following him for what felt like hours through a dark void, until he reached a bedroom of his own. "What is this place?" I asked. "My own nightmare," he replied as he turned to a younger version of himself asleep in bed. Suddenly, I saw a window slowly pry open as a masked man broke in and moved towards the young man with a knife. Not knowing what else to do, I sprang to the young man's rescue, darting toward the intruder and grappling with him, waking the young man who watched on in horror, as the masked man was somehow impaled on his own knife and toppled out the window. After catching my breath, I turned back to the young man who had a smile on his face. "Thank you," he said as he handed me a key. I stood there in silence, unable to believe what had happened, before turning back to the monster, who I assumed had been watching the whole time. But he was gone. I turned back to the young man, who was still staring at me, then stumbled backwards out of his room and back into the darkness, where I turned around and walked back in the direction I had come from. When I finally emerged from the darkness, holding the key, I found Brenda, Mr. Carlson, and Officer Howe all standing there in the foyer, a look of shock on all their faces, having clearly expected that I would never return. I didn't say anything. I simply walked over to the home's front door, inserted the key, and opened it. Suddenly, a ray of sunshine burst into the home. I took a step outside and stood there for a moment until my eyes eventually adjusted to the daylight, and I found myself outside Mr. Carlson's home. The door still open, I looked back inside the home and saw Brenda, Mr. Carlson, and Officer Howe standing there in disbelief. I signaled for them to join me. Brenda and Officer Howe followed with big smiles on their faces, overjoyed to escape the horrors in the home. But Mr. Carlson, he simply stayed behind. "Mr. Carlson, what are you waiting for?" But he didn't reply. He simply took a seat on the staircase. "Do me a favor. When you shut the door, leave the key inside the doorknob," the old man said. "But why?" I asked, unable to understand why he would choose to stay inside the place. "So I can see my son again," he explained. I then closed the front door of the house and looked down at its now keyless doorknob, before reaching into my pocket for the key that the young man had given me. Officer Howe ran over to stop me, but it was too late. I had already placed the key in the doorknob and locked the door. He gave me a look of horror as I turned to see my wife pulling into my driveway next door. I looked over at her, and after spending what felt like weeks inside Mr. Carlson's home, expected her to be shocked to see me. But my wife simply waved hello as if I had never left. "Don't forget to walk the dog," she called out casually, before turning off the car and walking away into our home next door, as Brenda and Officer Howe looked over at me, still shocked by what they had just experienced. Nationwide mandatory return to office. The email subject line hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, there was no return involved, for me at least. I'd been hired pre-pandemic to a fully remote position. I recalled the countless hours I'd spent scouring for such a role and how ecstatic I'd been when I'd been selected for it. The job entailed hard work, but I'd excelled at it, and my husband and I had built our family around the flexibility it offered. Now, my employer had the gall to suggest that its rescission of the promise it had made to me would improve productivity, foster increased collaboration, and instill a sense of family amongst our staff. Nope, nope, and yuck, I thought. The email continued by declaring that true success and experience required a regular presence in the office. It all read like our CEO, in typical form, projecting his own uselessness and impotence onto his employees. I sighed. Why couldn't I, or for that matter anyone else on my team, be dumb, lazy, and short-sighted enough to climb the corporate ladder as high as he had? My husband and I scrambled to make the necessary life changes as my applications to other jobs went nowhere. Realizing we could no longer give our dog the amount of exercise and attention she needed, we rehomed her to live with my mother-in-law. We staggered our work schedules to permit one of us to drop off our twins at daycare and the other to pick them up at the end of the day. My husband, who always fought to maintain a positive attitude, reminded me that we were still living a good life in the grand scheme of things, even if we were set to have less time together as a family. I know, I replied. It's just that we all know that these changes aren't happening for good reasons. We're moving backwards, just because the jerks who run these companies think they're a lot smarter than they really are. I shrugged, feeling defeated and exasperated. But that's just the way it's always been, and always going to be, isn't it? Tilda, finding a parking space, driving was the only option due to the lack of public transit, proved nightmarish. For over 20 minutes, I meandered through all 9 floors of the garage, searching for an open spot. Finally, I wedged my car into the only gap I could find, which lay between a support column and a truck left sloppily over the line by its driver, and escaped my vehicle by crawling out of the back seat. As I hurried down a staircase and towards the main building, I wondered how anyone who arrived after me would be able to park. I was there relatively early after all, and I hadn't seen any other available spaces. Passing underneath the giant Abernathy Industries emblem, I entered the main lobby where a young woman in azure jacket and skirt suit waved to me. "You must be Cora," she said before introducing herself as Monica. "I'm with HR and I'll be showing you the way to your office." "Nice to meet you, Monica," I said. "I believe we've talked by email a few times." "Indeed we have." As we shook hands, a bright beaming smile stretched across her face. "This is such an exciting day for me," she gushed, a tear in her eye. "For all of us, really. You've been a part of this company for years, but now it feels different, like you're finally a part of our family." This took me aback. Naturally, I did not see, and had no desire to ever see, the people I put up with to pay my mortgage as brothers or sisters, or second cousins twice removed for that matter. So how do I find my office?" I asked, eager to change the subject. "Oh right," Monica responded as if snapping out of a trance. "This way." As she led me to the building's main elevator, we passed a set of closed double doors labeled Auditorium. "We do big events in there too," Monica explained. "In fact, we'll be doing a welcome celebration for you and all the other former remote workers in there this afternoon. Everyone will be in attendance. We're all so excited for it." Dear God, I thought, reflexively recoiling at the thought of an office social gathering. All I wanted from this company was a paycheck, not a party to honor its latest efforts to torment me. Inside the elevator, Monica pressed the button for 19. This confused me as my supervisor had emailed me that my team's offices were on the 18th floor. Monica, as if reading my mind, informed me that renovations were occurring in the 18th floor elevator lobby. "So you'll have to go to the 19th floor and then work your way down from there. I'll show you." "Oh, okay," I mumbled, annoyed at the extra time it would take to reach my workspace. The doors opened to reveal a gloomy hallway. Half the overhead lights seemed to be broken, and the other half flickered sporadically over a narrow patch of marble floor surrounded by a sea of carpet patterned in sickly shades of brown, gray, and dark green. "Accounting is that way," said Monica, motioning to the right, "and HR, including my office, is straight ahead. But for now, follow me this way through sales." At this, Monica abruptly scurried into the darkness. I called out for her to slow down, but she ignored me. Seeing no other option, I doubled my speed to keep up with her. We passed offices, cubicles, a rundown kitchen, and copy machines. I became disoriented as Monica turned sharply to the left, then to the left again at the next intersection, then right, then left once more. As Monica took me past a corner office, I peeked through the window of its closed door. Inside, I glimpsed a well-dressed figure sitting behind a desk. He was frozen in place as if deep in thought, and bizarrely, his face seemed to have no features at all. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth skin bereft of any other qualities. That can't be right, I thought to myself as I continued to hurry after Monica. Surely the window was made of frosted glass, or my eyes were playing tricks on me in the low light. Monica's voice emerged from the distant shadows. "You still there, Cora?" Yeah, on my way," I panted as I jogged towards her. Monica proceeded to lead me down a staircase. The floor below was just as gloomy as the floor above, and reaching my cubicle required traversing a maze of narrow corridors. "And here it is, your very own workspace," announced Monica as I examined the small area, which contained only a dingy chair facing a dusty computer on a plain desk. "If you have any concerns, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll be seeing you at the welcoming party later." "Actually, I do have a few questions," I said as I took a seat, "about the lighting and the route we took to get here, and the lack of space in the parking garage," and, to my surprise, I looked back to find Monica gone. "Monica," I called. She didn't respond, and when I got up to search for her, she seemed to have vanished. Senora Kitty Matilda. My computer slowly came to life, only to promptly turn itself off moments later. I groaned as the process repeated itself several times before the computer finally stayed on long enough for the login screen to appear. I hastily entered my credentials. My computer's hard drive proceeded to heat up and emit a series of discordant noises, as if my mere act of logging into it was causing it to struggle under an intense strain. How was I going to get anything done with all these delays? If I were using my work laptop, which I'd been required to mail back several days ago, I'd have accomplished a considerable amount already. Finally, after several minutes, everything appeared to have loaded. I opened 2 spreadsheets and was about to start working when an unfamiliar voice startled me. "Cora, so good to see you." I turned to find myself facing a Hispanic woman with long brown hair. Before I could react, she dashed up to me and wrapped her arms around me. Whoa, stop that," I screamed as I angrily shoved her off me. She backed up, her expression changing to a mixture of puzzlement and concern. "Is something wrong, Cora? Did I surprise you?" "Who are you?" I asked. "What? You know who I am. Don't be silly." No. She let out an irritated sigh. "Look, Cora, I'm not playing whatever game this is. It's me, Ava, your mentor and partner on countless projects. And you know that from the dozens and dozens of video calls we've had together. So why are you pretending not to?" This left me dumbfounded and bewildered. The person she was describing, the Ava I'd worked with for years, simply wasn't the woman standing at the entrance of my cubicle. That Ava, the correct one, was black for starters, had a totally different voice, and was not the kind of person to surprise me with an unsolicited hug. When I didn't respond, I didn't know how to. After all, fake Ava chimed in. "It's probably just the lights. They sure keep it dim around here, don't they? But you'll get used to it. When management first removed most of the lights, it upset me, but I adjusted and it stopped bothering me after a while," she continued, oblivious to the total disinterest I attempted to project. "Less electricity saves money and supports the bottom line after all, and that's what matters most. Anyway, did you hear the latest about Michael? His wife discovered the pictures, the ones with that flight attendant I told you about, and she's furious. Michael, meanwhile, keeps..." As she spoke, my mind tried to wrap itself around what was happening. Who was this person, and why was she impersonating Ava? And why was everything at the office so weird? "Anyway," continued fake Ava after several minutes of monologuing, "are you alright, Cora? You look tired." "Yeah, I'm just feeling a little run down," I answered truthfully. James and Ella had woken up twice last night. I'd barely gotten any sleep. "The twins keeping you up again?" she asked. This bothered me. It felt like an invasion of my privacy. How the hell did this lady know about my family situation? I'd vented about family issues to Ava, the real Ava, many times, but this lady had no way of knowing any of that. "Look, why don't we talk later?" I asked, eager to get rid of her. "I need to get back to work." Sure thing, I'll see you soon. Let's grab lunch sometime soon. At that, fake Ava finally left me in peace. I turned back to my computer. I thought about typing up a resignation letter and marching right out, assuming I could even find the building exit at this point. Everything that had happened thus far today left me deeply uncomfortable. I didn't want to work here anymore, consequences that may be. I opened a blank Word document and began drafting an email to my supervisor explaining all the reasons why I was providing my 2 weeks notice. The thoughts I laid out were unfiltered and littered with pejoratives directed at company leadership. I knew I would water it down and clean it up prior to sending it, but for now, it felt good to write how I honestly felt. Before long, the words before me blurred together as the combination of minimal lighting and barely 2 hours of sleep sent me into a daze. I'll close my eyes just for a second, I told myself as I leaned back and retreated into memories of happier times. Tilde, I awoke to the sound of a high-pitched whine. At first I assumed it to be the nighttime cry of James or Ella signifying the need for a diaper change or feeding. But as I regained my senses, I realized that I was still at work and that I had somehow managed to fall into a deep sleep in my cubicle's second-rate chair. Frantically, I checked my phone. It was 3:01 p.m. I'd slept nearly all day. I chided myself for letting this happen. I'd never slept at work before, much less for so long. Though, in fairness to me, nearly all the lights were out and the room was almost pitch black. Whatever, I thought. I'd made up my mind to quit this job anyway. Perhaps it was something of a conciliation prize that I'd managed to fall into the deepest nap since I gave birth to the twins on the same day I would provide my 2 weeks notice. But why was it so dark, and what was the distant sound which continued to wail through my work area that had woken me? I discerned something strange about my computer too. When I placed my hands on the keyboard, the buttons felt different than usual. They didn't press down or react at all to my touch. When I shined my only source of light, my cell phone's flashlight function, on my computer, I saw that my computer had been replaced by a paper replica of itself. The kind of thing you'd, if you're old enough, see in a display at an office supply store. What the, I thought. The weirdness of it alone bothered me plenty, but even worse was the implication that someone had switched out my functioning computer while I dozed right in front of it. That's it, I'm getting out of here. The first thing I noticed as I entered the surrounding labyrinth of offices and cubicles is that they all appeared to be unoccupied. My flashlight revealed a few signs of life. A stray pen, a coffee mug, or a half-finished snack, but no people. Picture frames stood on some desks and hung on some walls, but they displayed only blank voids rather than images of smiling families. I tried to retrace the route Monica had taken me on, but quickly found myself at a dead end. Hello, I hollered. I'm a bit lost. Can anybody help me? There was no response. As I wandered further, turning in different directions as I went, it dawned on me that I'd yet to see a single window to the outside world. Even as my surroundings seemed to stretch on unbelievably far, the lack of any glimpse of the sun or sky made me feel claustrophobic. I encountered 2 staircase doors, but in what I assumed to be a serious fire hazard, each was locked. The handle to one of them, marked emergency exit, was even encumbered by layers of heavy metal chains. The sound that woke me reverberated again. I was close to it, and I could now sense that it possessed a hollow machine-like timbre. Lacking any better ideas, I headed down towards it. The carpeted floor before me was damp. Some kind of puddle had formed on it, and while I couldn't get a good look at it, the wet substance on it did not appear to be water. Rather, it had a murky greenish quality to it. Using my flashlight, I traced the liquid to its source, which appeared to be an air vent that's steadily dripping a small stream of it onto the ground below. I hopped over puddle, landing near the closed door to the room that appeared to be the source of the sound. When I opened the door, the blinding light inside forced me to shut my eyes. As my vision slowly adjusted, I realized that the sound simply originated from the standard copy machine housed in this room, which appeared to be in the midst of a large printing job. Examining it more closely, I realized that it seemed to be stuck in a peculiar loop. Each page in a large ream of paper entered it on one side, went through the machine, and exited without a single marking on it. Once the output tray reached a particular height, the sheets would slide down a ramp into the input tray, repeating the loud and pointless cycle. I placed a finger on the power button and held it there until the machine turned off. An eerie silence followed, broken only by the soft pats of my feet against the carpet as I re-entered the hallway. I walked, trying every door as I did so. Most were locked, some led to vacant offices, others led to empty closets, or break rooms with crumbs and pots half filled with the remnants of last week's coffee. As time passed, the darkness around me, still punctured only by my phone light, seemed to grow more opaque, more encompassing. Occasionally, I'd see what looked to be the same supply cabinet filled with purple highlighters, or the same translucent puddle of gunk, or the same cubicle with a running fan and a chair plopped on its side. Hints that I was somehow traveling in a circle, but I took no discernible turns, and the order in which I came upon each landmark was inconsistent. How do I get out of here? I realized I was becoming thirsty, and I knew my phone battery wouldn't last forever. When I tried calling my husband, to be followed if he didn't answer by a call to the front desk and then 911 if necessary. The call failed despite my phone displaying that it had service. Distant sounds drew my attention. At first, they resembled high-pitched giggles, but as I approached, they erupted into the buoyant laughter of a crowd. How anyone could feel compelled to express any feeling of joy in this hellhole perplexed me, but I attempted to track down the source all the same. If I just follow the laughter, I'll find someone who can lead me out, I told myself. But deep down, what I wanted most was the simple reassurance that I wasn't stuck here all alone. I ran down hallways, I climbed over cubicle walls, I yanked at stuck doorknobs and stormed from one side of a sticky, dingy kitchen to the exit on the other side. Finally, I found myself in a narrow corridor. At the opposite end, an overhead light blared over an open rectangular space. At least a dozen figures stood in it, but my eyes, having long ago adjusted to the dark, couldn't make out any distinguishing features on them. They just stood there facing me. Then, all at once, they were gone. Their laughter faded too, leaving behind only the same sterile silence that had haunted me for so long. Had they run away or gone somewhere else? I chased after them, calling out for help. I found myself in exactly the place I was looking for, an elevator lobby. Contrary to Monica's warning, I see no evidence of renovations. The people assembled here must have just gone downstairs. I didn't ask myself what they were doing standing here and bellowing for so long. I didn't need to know that. I just needed to get the hell out, something I finally had a way to do. Nervously, I held out my hand and prayed that the down button. I held my breath as the floor display slowly reached my level, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. The doors then opened to reveal a clean, well-lit elevator cab. I rushed inside, hit the lobby button, and watched with relief as the doors closed and the elevator began its descent. I tapped my sweaty fingers impatiently against the wall as the floor steadily ticked down. Finally, L appeared and the doors opened to the main lobby. Only one thing stood between me and the exit. A pale woman with curly red hair, the first person I'd seen in ages, whose face lit up upon seeing me exit the elevator. "Girl, what took you so long?" she hollered in a nauseatingly excited voice. "You almost missed it, come on." I sped past her, my gaze focused on the way out. She moved rapidly, her firm hand grabbing me around the wrist before I could react. I attempted to fling her off, but with surprising force, she easily held me in place. "Cora, the party's that way," she said, gesturing towards the auditorium with a hand that wasn't restraining me. "I know how much you want to get home and see the twins, but you have to at least make an appearance." "Let me go," I cried. She adopted a deadpan expression. "Cora, we're not doing that. First, you pretend not to know me. Next, you zone out the whole time I'm filling you in about Michael. And now you try to skip your own welcome back party. You and me were like sisters, Cora. What happened to you?" My jaw dropped. Was this person also pretending to be Ava? I tried to pull away from her again, only for the second fake Ava to whirl around, restrain me, and with remarkable strength pull me towards the auditorium. I kept trying to fight her, to pull her off of me, but all succeeded in doing was exhausting myself even further. Some of what followed passed in a blur. I recall Ava, or whatever she was, dragging me past row after row of empty seats, across countless small puddles of rancid goo, and onto a stage covered in banners, streams, and balloons. An unnatural warmth drifting down from the air above, and the sense that I was being watched by something hostile and utterly evil. I remember spotting a loose balloon and watching it as it floated ever so slowly up and above the auditorium stage, stage. With a loud pop, it burst upon making contact with a sight that still horrifies me to this day. An amalgam of body parts stretched across the ceiling. A soup of limbs, torsos, lips, ears, and more than anything, faces. So many faces, all floating in an inverted pool, a hazy green substance occasionally dripping from their pained, open mouths onto the floor below. A plethora of voices, one of which I recognized as Monica's, began speaking. "Welcome home. We're happy to have you here with us. We've been waiting for you for so long. I knew you'd make it." I felt paralyzed. For a moment I stood there, speechless and stunned, as the faces, male and female, black and white, young and old, oozed into a new form held together by flabby patches of skin and bent tendons. They combined into a gigantic, monstrous face, with an open, hungry mouth lined by hundreds of lips, filled with teeth composed of thousands of teeth. Out of its mouth slithered a long, slimy organ. It unfurled as it dropped, landing before me with a wet plate. It was a tongue, stitched together from the tongues and various other organs that had once belonged to the marketers, janitors, supervisors, accountants, and secretaries of my company. My captor pushed me closer to it. For a moment I thought about giving up, about letting the sticky ligament wrap around me and pull me upwards into the gaping mouth. I wondered what it would be like to be digested by that thing, to become a part of it, to become one with everyone else. I imagined it swallowing up my anxieties, my student debt, and my bouts of insomnia, and replacing them with bottomless sleep. The mouth above me emanated several words in a deep, slurred voice, but I wasn't paying attention to it. I knew I had to fight, not just for myself, but also for the twins, my husband, and the life I wanted to live. James and Ella are counting on me, I told myself, as I mustered the kind of strength that courses through an animal protecting its young. It caught fake Ava off guard. At first, she managed to keep her grip on me, but the pain from the way I scratched and dug my nails into her arm eventually wore her down. With all my might, I pried her off of me, and without wasting a moment, took the opportunity to run. I remember screaming, loud, even deafening screaming, from above, as if every face that made up that creature was shrieking its disapproval. But I didn't look up, nor did I glance back to see if fake Ava was following me. No, all I did was run. I sprinted across the auditorium, through the main lobby, and out the front door. I kept going for as long as I could until my feet were blistered and my body could take me no further. I didn't care about my car, which to this day I assume remains where I IF'd it between the support column and the truck. I just cared about putting as much distance as possible between me and my employer. No, it's not Tilda. I still have nightmares about what I saw. More than anything, what frightens me is the knowledge that it's still out there and that it's still hungry. There was a strange email on my computer the next morning. It was from Monica, and it stated that my resignation email had been accepted. This struck me as weird, as I'd never finished writing, much less sent that email, but I had no reason to pick a fight about it. Monica promised a good severance after all, and even added that I wouldn't have to do anything more to collect it. No paperwork, no projects to finish up. It would be a clean break. "Best wishes to you and your family," she wrote at the end of the message. This made me uncomfortable, though it took me a moment to realize why. Then it dawned on me. It was what the thing, the face on the ceiling, had said to me just as I made my move to escape. The words I have tried so very, very hard to block out of my mind ever since. "Join us, Cora. Come, become a part of our family."
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.